Hey there, story lovers. This is DC Harry, and we're bringing you an epic adventure. What if Batman discovered Harry at age 4 and Dark Knight adopted him as Robin, training wizard detective in Batcave? Hit like, subscribe, and let's begin this journey. Chapter 1, The Alley. The energy readings made no sense. Bruce had been staring at the spectral analysis for 40 minutes, seated in front of 3 monitors in the cave, the hum of the waterfall filling the silence the way it always did when he was thinking hard about something that refused to cooperate with logic. The readings had come from 3 separate sensors, one mounted in the East End near Mercy General, one on the roof of a parking garage on Finger Avenue, one embedded in the underside of a Wayne Enterprises environmental monitoring drone that had been passing over the area at the right moment. All 3 had spiked simultaneously at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday in late October. All 3 had recorded the same thing, a localized burst of energy that matched no known electromagnetic signature, no known chemical reaction, no known weapon or device in any database Bruce had access to, and he had access to essentially all of them. It wasn't radiation. It wasn't plasma. It wasn't sonic. It wasn't anything the sensors had a category for, which was the part that bothered him most. His sensors had categories for everything. He'd gone to the East End to look for himself, which was how he usually handled things that refused to cooperate with logic. Gotham's East End at midnight was the usual tableau: wet pavement, distant sirens, the particular smell of the river mixing with exhaust and something that was probably a dumpster fire 3 blocks north. He moved across rooftops for the first 20 minutes, following the triangulated origin point the sensors had given him, and then he came down to street level because the reading suggested the source had been ground level, not elevated. The origin point was a service alley between a dry cleaner and a closed pawn shop on Mercy Street. He almost missed the boy. The alley was dark enough that even with his lenses switched to low light enhancement, he nearly stepped past the shape in the corner. A small figure, sitting with his back against the brick wall, knees pulled to his chest, half hidden behind a dumpster. Bruce stopped. He crouched. He looked. The boy was small even for what Bruce estimated was age 3 or 4, underweight, clearly, the kind of thinness that came from months of not quite enough rather than a single missed meal. He was wearing clothes that didn't fit, a too large shirt and trousers with the cuffs rolled up several times, and he had dark hair that went in every direction without apparent apology. There was a healing bruise along his left cheekbone, yellowing at the edges, which meant it was several days old. There was a fresher cut on his forearm, the kind with clean edges that suggested something sharp and accidental rather than deliberate. He was awake. His eyes, an extremely vivid shade of green that registered even in low-light mode, were open and watching Bruce with an expression that had no business being on the face of a 4-year-old. It wasn't fear. It wasn't the blank shock of a child in crisis. It was something more like careful assessment, a weighing up, the kind of look Bruce associated with people who had learned very young that reacting too quickly to new information was dangerous. Bruce held very still. "Hey," he said, keeping his voice low and even. The boy didn't move. He watched. "Are you hurt?" A pause. Then a small headshake. "No." "Are you alone?" Another pause, longer this time, and something moved through those green eyes that might have been a complicated answer compressing itself into a simpler one. Then a nod. "Yes." Bruce looked at the mouth of the alley, then back at the boy. "How long have you been here?" The boy's brow furrowed slightly, the way children's do when they're genuinely calculating something rather than performing thought. He held up 3 fingers, then seemed uncertain, then held up 4. 3 or 4 hours, maybe. Or 3 or 4 days. With a child this young it was hard to know which scale he was working on. "What's your name?" Bruce asked. The boy looked at him for a long moment. "Harry," he said. His voice was small but clear. "Harry." "Okay." Bruce scanned the alley again. The sensors were picking up residual traces of whatever had caused the original spike, concentrated strongest right here, right where the boy was sitting, which was a data point he filed without yet knowing what to do with it. "My name is Bruce." I'm going to sit down, okay? Right here. I'm not going to touch you or make you do anything. He settled onto the damp concrete with his back against the opposite wall, cape pooling around him, about 4 feet from the boy. He took his cowl off. He wasn't sure why he did it, instinct, probably, something that said the mask is wrong here. He set it on the ground beside him. Harry looked at the cowl. Then he looked at Bruce's face. His expression shifted fractionally, becoming, not less careful, exactly, but differently careful. Like he'd been calculating with one set of variables and had just been handed a new one. You don't look scary, Harry said. The suit's meant to, Bruce said. It works better in the dark. Harry appeared to consider this seriously. Why do you want to look scary? It's complicated. Oh. Harry looked at the cowl again. My aunt says I'm scary. When things break. Bruce kept his face neutral. What things? Harry pulled his knees tighter to his chest. He looked at his own hands for a moment, small hands, the fingers thin and bitten-nailed, and then he said, very quietly, like he was confessing something, just things. They break when I'm upset. Or sometimes they fly. I don't mean them to. The sensors in the suit registered another microspike of the anomalous energy, brief, barely registering, but localized precisely at the boy's position. Bruce looked at his hands. Can I see? He said. Harry hesitated. Then he uncurled slightly and held his hands out, palms up. Nothing happened for a moment. Then, very slowly, the piece of broken glass lying on the ground between them, brown glass from a shattered bottle, several fragments of it, began to tremble. Then it began to rise, a quarter inch, half an inch, the fragments lifting in a loose constellation and catching what little light reached the alley. Bruce watched the glass float. The energy reading spiked to 3 times the baseline from the initial event and then steadied. Harry's hands were shaking. His jaw was set with the specific tension of a child concentrating very hard on something they couldn't fully control, the fragments of glass wobbling, starting to drift apart, and then he exhaled sharply and they dropped, clattering back to the pavement. He looked at Bruce like he was waiting for the explosion. The flinch, the shouting, the pulling away. Bruce said, "That's impressive." Harry blinked. He looked like the wrong variable had been entered again. Aunt Petunia says it's not. Aunt Petunia's wrong. Something happened in the boy's face then, small and complicated, like a lock turning in a door that had never been opened, and Bruce decided, in that particular way he decided things, which was quickly and completely and without much visible drama, that this child was not going back to wherever Aunt Petunia was. He picked up the cowl. He stood. He looked down at Harry, who was watching him with those 2 old eyes in his small, bruised face. Are you hungry? Bruce asked. Harry's stomach answered for him, a mortifyingly loud rumble that echoed slightly in the brick alley, and then something extraordinary happened. Harry Potter, 4 years old, sitting in a Gotham alley at midnight in clothes 3 sizes too large, looked profoundly embarrassed about his own digestion and then laughed, this sudden unplanned laugh that was completely out of proportion to his face and filled the alley like it owned the place. Bruce felt something move in his chest that he didn't immediately have a name for. He filed it. Come on, he said, and held out his hand, and Harry looked at it for only a moment before he took it. Getting back to the car with a 4-year-old in full Batman kit was a tactical challenge Bruce had not previously anticipated needing to solve. Harry was small enough that Bruce could carry him, which he did for the roof-level portions, the boy gripping the suit with both hands and making no sound, his face pressed against Bruce's shoulder. He was light in a way that wasn't comfortable to think about. When they reached the car, the secondary vehicle, a modified Lexus kept in a parking structure 2 blocks from the cave entrance, less conspicuous than the other options, Harry stood in front of it and stared for a full 10 seconds before he got in. It's very clean, Harry said. Alfred, Bruce said. Who's Alfred? You'll meet him. He drove. Harry sat in the passenger seat, there was no child seat, which was a problem Bruce made a mental note to solve within 24 hours, and watched Gotham go by outside the window with an expression of quiet intensity, taking the city in like he was memorizing it. Bruce watched him in the peripheral mirror and thought about the glass rising off the ground, the energy readings, the bruise on his cheek, the clothes that didn't fit, and the look on his face when Bruce had said Aunt Petunia was wrong. He called Alfred on the hands-free system. Alfred picked up on the second ring, because Alfred always picked up on the second ring regardless of the hour. Master Bruce. I take it the East End provided something more interesting than unusual electromagnetic readings. I'm bringing someone home. A pause. Alfred's pauses were precisely calibrated instruments. This one lasted approximately 2 seconds. I see. Should I prepare the medical bay? The kitchen, actually. He's hungry. Bruce glanced at Harry, who was now watching the hands-free speaker with the same focused attention he'd given everything else. We'll need the medical bay too, but the kitchen first. Another pause. He's 4. His name is Harry. The pause this time was longer. Then Alfred said, with a quality of warmth that he generally kept well buried under several layers of professional dryness, I'll put the kettle on. Harry looked at Bruce. Who's Alfred? I told you. You'll meet him. But who is he? Bruce thought about it. He's the person who keeps everything working, he said finally. Harry considered this. Like a butler? Exactly like a butler. How do you know what a butler is? Mrs. Figg told me, Harry said, and turned back to the window. She has lots of cats. Bruce filed Mrs. Figg and the cats and kept driving. Wayne Manor at 1 in the morning was enormous and mostly dark, lit only by the security system's ambient lighting and the warm glow from the kitchen at the back of the house. Alfred was standing at the counter when Bruce brought Harry through the service entrance. He was wearing his dressing gown over his pajamas, which was the only time Alfred ever looked anything less than immaculate, and he had made tea and also, Bruce noticed, a plate of buttered toast and what appeared to be scrambled eggs, because Alfred had correctly identified that scrambled eggs at 1 a.m. represented the ideal combination of speed, nutrition, and comfort. Alfred looked at Harry. Harry looked at Alfred. Hello, Harry said carefully. Hello, young Harry, Alfred said, with the manner of someone who had always known a small boy would show up in the kitchen in the middle of the night and had been entirely prepared for it. Are you hungry? Harry looked at the eggs. He looked at Alfred. Yes please, he said, with the particular formality of a child who had been taught that manners were armor. Alfred guided him to the kitchen table, pulled out a chair, and set the plate in front of him. Harry ate with the focused, methodical attention of someone who had learned not to assume there would be more. He didn't wolf it down, he was too controlled for that, but he cleared the plate efficiently and completely, and when Alfred, without comment, added another piece of toast, Harry looked at it with an expression that cracked something open behind Bruce's eyes. Bruce stood in the doorway and watched Alfred and Harry and the kitchen, and he thought about a crime scene 26 years ago and a different alley and a different kind of loss, and he thought about energy readings that defied categorization and glass rising off the ground and a child who laughed in the dark. Alfred met his eyes over Harry's head. His expression said, "You did the right thing." It also said, with the layered efficiency of someone who had known Bruce Wayne for 30 years, "And now you need to figure out what comes next, and I will help you, and don't be an idiot about it." Bruce nodded. He crossed the kitchen and sat down at the table across from Harry. The boy looked up at him, a piece of toast halfway to his mouth. In the kitchen light, the bruise on his cheek was more visible, a solid impact, the kind left by something flat and broad, a hand or a strap. Bruce noted it and did not react to it, because reacting to it in front of Harry served no immediate purpose. "Are you going to take me back?" Harry asked. Conversational, almost. Like he was asking about the weather. "No," Bruce said. Harry ate his toast. He seemed to think about this for a while. Then, "Where's Aunt Petunia?" "I don't know yet. I'm going to find out." Bruce leaned forward slightly. Harry. Can you tell me where you were living? Before the alley. Harry set his toast down. He looked at his plate. Privet Drive, he said. But we moved. Uncle Vernon said Gotham was for work. Then, he stopped. His jaw tightened. They put me outside. How long ago? Harry held up 4 fingers again, that same uncertain gesture. It was still light, he said. Then it went dark. Then it went light. Then it went dark again. Then you came. 2 days. Bruce kept his face absolutely still. Harry had been in that alley for approximately 48 hours. Okay, Bruce said. You're not going back. Harry looked at him, that weighing up look, the careful assessment that had no business being in a 4-year-old's eyes. You said that already. I know. I wanted to say it again. Harry picked his toast back up. Okay, he said, in the tone of someone who had decided to provisionally accept new information and would continue to evaluate it going forward. It was, Bruce thought, an extremely familiar tone. He used it himself on a regular basis. Alfred caught his eye and looked briefly skyward. They put Harry in one of the smaller guest rooms. Alfred made it up with remarkable speed, producing child-appropriate linens from somewhere, a stuffed bear that Bruce suspected Alfred had quietly owned for decades against exactly this kind of eventuality, and a glass of water on the nightstand. Harry stood in the middle of the room in his 2 large clothes and looked around at the space, the high ceilings, the heavy curtains, the large bed, with an expression of absolute bewilderment. It's a big room, he said. Is that all right? Alfred asked. Harry seemed to genuinely consider whether it was all right. He walked to the bed and pressed his hand against the mattress experimentally, testing its realness. He looked at the water glass. He looked at the stuffed bear. He looked at Alfred. Is there a cupboard? He asked. Alfred and Bruce exchanged a look above Harry's head. Bruce felt the particular cold stillness that settled over him when evidence led to a conclusion he didn't like. There's a wardrobe, Alfred said smoothly, gesturing toward the large wardrobe against the opposite wall. Plenty of space. Harry nodded slowly. Then, with the careful precision of someone operating in unfamiliar territory, he climbed up onto the bed, pulled the covers back, and got in. He lay on his back and stared at the ceiling. The stuffed bear sat beside him. He looked, not peaceful, exactly, but contained. Like an engine that had been running hot finally throttling down. Bruce, he said. Bruce turned from the doorway. Yeah. What are you going to do with the energy readings? Bruce stared at him. How do you know about energy readings? You said it on the phone in the car, Harry said. You said the East End provided something more interesting than unusual electromagnetic readings. I thought that was why you were there. He had been listening to every word of a conversation he'd had no apparent stake in, processing and retaining technical language he couldn't possibly understand, and had waited until now to mention it. Bruce looked at the 4-year-old in the large bed and thought, absolutely not going anywhere near a cupboard. I'm going to study them, Bruce said. Go to sleep. Okay. A pause. Bruce? What? Thank you. Bruce stood in the doorway for a moment. He said, go to sleep, Harry, and pulled the door to, leaving it open 3 inches the way Alfred had silently suggested by not closing it fully himself, and he walked back toward the cave because there was a great deal of work to do and the cave was where he did it. He was halfway down the passage when he stopped. He stood there in the dark for a moment. He thought about an alley on Park Row, and 2 people falling, and a child standing in the dark with no one coming. He turned around and went back to the kitchen and made himself a cup of tea, which he didn't drink, and sat at the kitchen table until the sky outside started to go gray. The investigation into Harry's background took 3 days. Bruce ran it in parallel with keeping Harry occupied, a task that proved substantially more demanding than any case he'd worked in recent memory, because Harry Potter at 4 years old had the attention span of a research scientist and the energy of a small, highly motivated tornado. He wanted to know how everything worked. The kitchen appliances, the security system's visible panels, the elevator, the dumbwaiter that Alfred used to send meals to the upper floors. He did not, notably, ask about the restricted door at the back of the study, which led to the cave passage. He simply looked at it the way he'd looked at everything else, quietly catalogued it, and said nothing. Which meant he had identified it as notable and decided not to push yet, which was a level of tactical patience that Bruce found genuinely remarkable in a child who had been eating institutional-sized portions of scrambled eggs for 3 days. Alfred took to him immediately and without visible reservation, which told Bruce more than any explicit endorsement would have. Alfred's approval was not freely given and never performed. He simply began doing what Alfred did when he cared about someone, which was anticipate every need before it was expressed and make the anticipation look effortless. He produced child-sized clothing. He knew which foods Harry preferred before Harry knew himself. He read to him in the evenings in the library, patient and precise, and when Harry interrupted to ask questions, and Harry interrupted a lot, Alfred answered every single one seriously, which was the only way to answer questions from someone who was asking them seriously. Harry, for his part, watched Alfred the way he watched everything, with care, with assessment, and eventually, on the third evening, with something that had started to look like the first careful shoots of trust. The investigation turned up what Bruce expected and worse. Vernon Dursley, currently employed by a Gotham-based manufacturing conglomerate, had a domestic disturbance report filed against him in Surrey 18 months ago, never charged. Petunia Dursley, née Evans, had a sister named Lily who had died in 1981, along with her husband James Potter, in a house fire in Godric's Hollow according to the public record, but the public record, Bruce noticed, had some strange holes in it. No arson investigation. No insurance claim. No coroner's report cross-reference to the fire report in the way those documents always cross-referenced in Bruce's experience of very thoroughly reading public records. Harry James Potter, born July 31, 1980. Delivered into the care of Petunia Dursley following the deaths of his parents. There was a handwritten note in the social services file, one note, unusual in its singularity, that said, placement made per specific instruction. Do not reassign. A.D. No last name. No agency affiliation. No follow-up documentation. The energy readings, meanwhile, had been building something in the back of Bruce's mind. He pulled every piece of literature he could find on anomalous energy phenomena, theoretical physics papers, fringe science journals, one ancient and frankly baffling compendium of documented paranormal events that had turned up in a collection of materials confiscated from a Ras Al Ghul cell 3 years ago, and which Bruce had set aside for later review and then forgotten about entirely. He did not forget about things. He went back to that compendium on night 2, read it with the focused attention he gave to everything, and by night 3 had a working hypothesis that he would not have entertained under any other circumstances. He was entertaining it now because of the glass rising off the ground and the censors and the 4-year-old who watched everything and said thank you like he'd been waiting a long time to have something to be thankful for. On the 4th morning he called Lucius Malfoy. Lucius was a man Bruce had met at 3 different galas, done business with twice through Wayne Enterprises intermediaries, and maintained in his mental file under significant unknown factors, old money, older connections, a particular quality of careful guardedness around certain subjects that Bruce associated with people who belonged to things they didn't advertise. He also, Bruce recalled now with the particular pleasure of a data point clicking into place, had a son of approximately Harry's age who attended what Lucius had once called a very exclusive school in Scotland. When pressed, Lucius had smiled and changed the subject with a smoothness that suggested considerable practice. It was a fishing call, careful and deniable. Bruce referenced the energy anomaly in a vague, experimental way, described it as a Wayne Enterprises research interest. There was a pause on Lucius's end, not Alfred's calibrated pause, but a quick, involuntary one, the kind people make when they hear something that surprises them into momentary stillness. Anomalous energy readings in the East End, Lucius repeated. That's very specific, Bruce. I'm a specific person. Yes. Another pause. There are people who study those kinds of anomalies. Specialists. I could perhaps put you in contact with someone. That would be helpful, Bruce said, and meant it. Lucius gave him a name, not a contact number, not an address, just a name, Albus Dumbledore, and said it in the careful, testing way of someone laying down a card to see if the other player knows what game they're playing. Bruce wrote the name down. He said nothing that would confirm or deny what he knew, which was his standard approach to incomplete information, and he thanked Lucius and ended the call. He ran the name through every database he had. He found nothing. No records, no paper trail, no digital presence whatsoever, which in 1984 was unusual but not impossible for a private individual. What was unusual was how clean it was, not the absence of records but the smoothness of the absence, no rough edges where records should have been, as though someone had not simply omitted the information but actively curated the omission. He went to talk to Harry. Harry was in the library. Alfred had set him up with a drawing pad and a collection of colored pencils. Bruce had come home the previous evening to find a drawing on the kitchen table that turned out to be a remarkably accurate floor plan of the east wing of the manor, rendered in green and blue pencil by a 4-year-old who had apparently been conducting his own systematic survey of the building. Now Harry was drawing something new, tongue slightly out, concentrating. Bruce sat in the armchair across from him. Harry didn't look up. "What are you drawing?" Bruce asked. "The alley," Harry said. Bruce looked at the drawing. It was the alley from Mercy Street, the dumpster, the brick walls, the proportions not perfect but clearly the same space. And there, in the corner, a small figure with dark hair and a very large man in a pointed-eared suit, sitting across from each other. "Harry," Bruce said. "I need to tell you some things. And I need you to tell me if any of it sounds familiar." Harry looked up. "Okay. Your parents. Lily and James Potter. Do you remember them?" A stillness came over Harry's face. He held his pencil carefully. "No," he said. "Aunt Petunia said they died in a car crash. She said it was their fault." He paused. "She said lots of things were their fault." "She lied," Bruce said. "Your parents didn't die in a car crash." Harry held the pencil perfectly still. "How did they die?" "I don't know the full answer yet. But I'm going to find out." Bruce leaned forward. "Harry. You know how things move sometimes. When you don't mean them to." Harry nodded, a single careful nod. "Do you know why that happens?" A longer pause. Then, Aunt Petunia said it was wrong. Uncle Vernon said it was freakish. He said these words with the flat, empirical quality of someone reporting documented facts rather than offering an opinion, but his hands had tightened slightly around the pencil. "I try not to do it." "Don't," Bruce said. Harry looked at him. "Don't try not to do it," Bruce said. "Whatever it is, it's yours. It came from somewhere. We're going to find out where." He held Harry's gaze. "There's a name. Someone who apparently studies the kind of energy you generate. Someone who apparently had something to do with placing you with your aunt and uncle. His name is Albus Dumbledore. Does that name mean anything to you?" Harry frowned in the way he did when he was genuinely searching memory rather than performing the search. Then he said, "He was there. When I was very small. I don't really, I remember a purple hat." Bruce filed this. "Okay. I'm going to find him. And in the meantime," he stopped. Harry was watching him with those green eyes. "Waiting." Bruce said, "In the meantime, you're staying here." He said it simply, as fact, because he had decided it as fact, and the manner in which Bruce Wayne decided things was complete and not subject to revision. "This is your home. That's done." Harry looked at him for a long moment. He looked at the drawing on the table between them, the two figures in the alley, the small one and the tall one in the pointed-ear suit. He picked up his green pencil and added something to the drawing, carefully, at the bottom of the page. He slid it across the table. He'd added a building in the background. An enormous building with many windows. Under it, in the laborious block capitals of a child just learning to write, home. Bruce looked at it. He looked at Harry. He picked up the drawing and set it on the arm of his chair. "Alfred's making breakfast," he said. "Go." Harry went, at a run, feet loud on the library floor, and the library was very quiet after he left. Bruce sat in the armchair and held the drawing, and outside the tall windows of Wayne Manor, Gotham was turning from grey to gold in the early morning, and somewhere under the house the cave hummed quietly in the dark, patient and waiting, full of everything the world held that needed to be understood. He had a great deal of work to do. He picked up the drawing one more time, looked at the word at the bottom of the page, and put it in his breast pocket. He went to make breakfast. Chapter 2, The Education of Harry Wayne. The first time Harry beat Bruce at chess, he was 6 years old. Not symbolic chess, not good try for a child chess. He genuinely dismantled Bruce's queenside development in 14 moves, sacrificed a rook in a way that looked like a mistake until 3 moves later when it clearly and catastrophically wasn't, and then sat back in his chair with the pencil he'd been chewing and looked at the board with the expression of someone checking their own arithmetic. "Did I do that right?" he asked. Bruce looked at the board for a moment. "Yes," he said. Harry looked pleased in the contained, careful way he looked pleased about things. Not showy, just a small internal brightening, like a lamp turning up a notch. He was still working on letting things show on his face. Bruce recognized this because he had worked on the exact opposite for most of his adult life and understood the mechanism from the other direction. "Again?" Harry said. "Set it up," Bruce said, and Harry began resetting the pieces with quick, neat fingers, and Alfred appeared in the doorway of the study with tea and said nothing, but the corner of his mouth did something that Alfred would have denied if challenged. That was year 2. By year 3, the chess had migrated to the cave. The cave became Harry's second home by degrees, which was perhaps inevitable given that it occupied roughly 40% of the habitable space under Wayne Manor and had the additional advantage of being, by any objective measure, the most interesting room Harry Potter had ever been in. Bruce had not planned to introduce it to him so early. His general thinking had been something like age 7, maybe 8, once the basics were established, but Harry had found a passage on his own at age 5, following the sound of the waterfall with the methodical persistence of someone who had identified an anomaly and intended to resolve it. Bruce had been sitting at the main console running facial recognition on a Penguin associate when he heard small footsteps on the stone behind him, and had turned to find Harry standing at the cave entrance in his pajamas, eyes wide and completely lit up, looking at the cave the way a person looks at something they have been waiting their entire life to see without knowing they were waiting for it. He'd stood there for a full 30 seconds without speaking, which for Harry was an extraordinary span of silence. Then he said, "Is this where you keep everything?" "Yes," Bruce said. "Can I come in?" Bruce had looked at him, 5 years old, pajamas with small rockets on them, the cave's ambient blue light catching the lenses of the glasses they'd recently discovered he needed, his dark hair in its perpetual chaos, and thought about a dozen reasons to say not yet, and thought about what not yet would mean to a child who had spent years being told there were spaces he wasn't allowed into and things he wasn't allowed to be. "Come in," he said. Harry came in. He walked through the cave with his hands clasped behind his back, which was a gesture he had apparently absorbed from Alfred without knowing it, examining things without touching them, moving in the careful cataloging way that was already becoming his signature mode of engaging with the world. He stopped at the main console. He looked at the screens. He looked at the equipment racks. He looked at the vehicles. He looked at the training area with the mats and the hanging equipment and the weaponry locked in the secured cases. He turned to Bruce. "Can you teach me?" "Teach you what specifically?" Harry gestured at the cave in its entirety, a single sweep of his arm. "All of it." Bruce said, "Some of it. When you're older." "How old?" "Older than 5. Harry accepted this with the provisional tolerance he gave all delayed gratifications, filed for future negotiation, not abandoned. He came and sat in the secondary chair beside Bruce at the console. He looked at the screens. On the left monitor, the facial recognition program was cycling through Penguin's known associates. "What are you looking for?" Harry asked. Bruce explained it, briefly and without simplification, because he had discovered early that Harry's response to being simplified was the kind of patient, polite tolerance that made Bruce feel approximately 6 years old himself, which was a feeling he preferred to avoid. He explained the Penguin situation, the missing shipping containers, the suspected smuggling route through the East End docks. Harry listened. He looked at the facial recognition results. He looked at the shipping manifest Bruce had pulled up on the second screen. "The second name," Harry said, pointing. "He's listed on both this manifest and the one from 3 weeks ago. But not the others." Bruce looked. The boy was right. He had spotted a cross-reference in 30 seconds that Bruce had spent 4 minutes building toward. "Good catch," Bruce said. Harry looked at the screens with the satisfied intensity of someone who had just learned that their favorite game had a version they hadn't tried yet. That was how it started. The formal training began the summer Harry turned 7, and it began with the thing Bruce considered most fundamental, which was not fighting and not weapons and not even detective work in the conventional sense. It began with observation. He took Harry to Gotham. Not to the dark parts, not at night, just to the city, to a bench in Robinson Park on a Tuesday afternoon, to the lobby of a hotel on Finger Street, to a busy corner in the Diamond District, and he said, "Tell me what you see." Harry told him. In the park, a woman in expensive shoes who had been crying recently, a man reading a newspaper he'd already read today based on the wear at the crease, 2 teenagers who were not siblings despite wearing similar jackets, and a dog walker who was being paid to walk 6 dogs but was actually walking 5 because one of the leads was looped around a bench leg. In the hotel lobby, a man waiting for someone he owed money to, a woman who wasn't a guest and wasn't staff, and a bellhop who was stealing from luggage. He had slight asymmetric wear on his jacket's right pocket and his tips weren't proportional to his service quality. Bruce listened to all of this and said, "The bellhop. How do you know it's theft and not something else causing the pocket wear?" Harry thought about it. "His eyes," he said. "When someone comes through with luggage he watches the case first and the face second. Everyone else does it the other way around." Bruce looked at the bellhop. Harry was right. "Where did you learn to read eyes?" Bruce asked. Harry looked at him steadily. "Living with the Dursleys," he said, in the flat, factual tone he used for those references, which was the only tone Bruce had ever heard him use for them, never self-pity, never drama, just the reportage of a previous data set. "You had to know when Uncle Vernon was going to be angry. His eyes changed before his face did." Bruce said nothing for a moment. "Then, that's the right instinct. We're going to make it a system." The system became, over the following 2 years, something genuinely formidable. They read people. They studied body language, micro-expressions, gait analysis, the architecture of lies. Harry absorbed it the way he absorbed everything, with total focus and then with the particular pleasure of someone finding that a skill they've been developing instinctively actually has a structure and a vocabulary. He made it his own quickly, adding intuitions and observations that Bruce hadn't taught him, small innovations in methodology that Bruce quietly began incorporating into his own practice. At 8, Harry could identify a lie before the sentence was finished, could reconstruct a timeline of events from a room's physical state, could follow a trail through Gotham on foot without losing it. He was also reading at a university level, doing mathematics 3 grades above what Alfred's careful home curriculum required, and had developed the habit of maintaining 3 parallel trains of thought simultaneously, which Bruce recognized as a version of what he did himself and found both gratifying and slightly alarming. The fighting came next, and it came with rules. "I'm not teaching you to hurt people," Bruce said, the first morning they stood on the cave mats together. Harry was 7.5, slight and quick, watching Bruce the way he watched everything. "I'm teaching you to stop situations. There's a difference. What if stopping the situation requires hurting someone?" Harry asked immediately. "Then you use the minimum necessary. Not more." Harry considered this. "Who decides what's minimum necessary?" "You do." In the moment. Which is why the training matters, you have to know what you're capable of before you can calibrate the minimum. Harry nodded. This made logical sense to him, and logical sense was the primary currency Harry Potter traded in. Okay, he said. Show me. Bruce showed him. He started with falls and rolls, how to take impact, how to redirect force, how to use the ground rather than fight it. Harry was a natural athlete in the way that children who have learned to be very quiet and very quick tend to be. He had excellent proprioception, fast reflexes, and the particular kind of physical intelligence that comes from years of needing to make yourself small and unobtrusive in spaces that weren't designed for you. He had his father's instincts, Bruce suspected, though he had no way of verifying this. Within 6 months Harry could fall from any angle without injury, could roll out of a throw, and had begun to understand the basic geometry of leverage, how to use a larger opponent's momentum, how to create space, how to make strength count less than positioning. By the end of year 1 he was sparring with Bruce at a level that Bruce found himself taking seriously, which had happened faster than anticipated. Harry had one quality that stood out above everything else in the sparring context: he did not hesitate. He had no ego to protect in the exchange, no fear of looking foolish, no reflexive flinching that most beginners had to unlearn. When he moved completely, and when he made a mistake he didn't wince about it, he just filed it and adjusted. It made him very difficult to read and increasingly difficult to outmaneuver, because there was nothing in him that could be baited. You don't have fear responses in the normal places, Bruce said one evening after training, both of them sitting on the mat edge with water. Harry was 8. There was a fresh bruise on his forearm from a throw he'd taken wrong and self-corrected on before Bruce could intervene. Harry looked at him. Is that bad? It can be. Fear keeps you from walking off ledges. I know not to walk off ledges, Harry said. He considered for a moment. I think I'm afraid of things. Just not things most people are afraid of. Like what? A pause. This was one of the places where Harry's habitual guard was visible, not as evasion, just as the careful consideration of someone who had learned that the wrong answer could cost them. Being put back, he said finally, quietly, turning his water bottle in his hands. Being sent away. Bruce sat with this. He turned to face Harry directly, which made Harry look at him, because Harry always tracked direct attention. That's not going to happen, Bruce said. You said that before. I meant it then. I mean it now. Different day, same answer. He held Harry's gaze. You're not going anywhere, Harry. This is not temporary and it's not conditional. You could become a complete catastrophe, and I've seen the early signs, and you'd still be here. Harry almost smiled. A complete catastrophe, he repeated. The cave security logs show you rerouted the motion sensor in the East Corridor last week to run a test on its response time. You were 7. I put it back, Harry said. That's not the point. What is the point? The point is you're going to give me gray hair. Bruce stood and pulled Harry to his feet by the arm. Come on. Alfred made dinner an hour ago and he's doing the quiet disappointed thing. I hate the quiet disappointed thing. Everyone does. That's why it works. Move. The magic, and they called it magic now, openly, and without apology, because Bruce had done enough research and found enough of the right sources that the word fit better than any alternative, began manifesting more consistently and with greater range around the time Harry turned 8. It had never stopped entirely. Things still moved when Harry was startled or upset, though startled and upset were becoming increasingly rare emotional states for him. But at 8 the range expanded and the intentionality began to emerge. He could now produce effects deliberately, small ones, with concentration and precision. A pencil rolling toward him. A door latch lifting. Lights flickering in a pattern that was not random. They mapped it. Bruce approached it exactly as he approached everything, as a system to be understood, with properties and limits that could be defined through empirical testing. He built a new set of sensors specifically calibrated to Harry's energy signature, and they ran sessions in the cave where Harry would attempt to produce effects while Bruce measured the output. Harry loved these sessions unreservedly, which was one of the places where his age showed most clearly, the sheer delight of sitting in front of a sensor array and making things move with his mind, the pleasure of the numbers on the screens responding to what he was doing, confirming the reality of something he'd spent years being told was wrong and freakish. "It's telekinetic at base," Bruce said, watching the readout as Harry levitated a series of ball bearings in the cave's testing area, holding all 6 in a stable configuration about 3 feet off the ground. "But the energy signature is layered. There are components I can't classify." "It doesn't feel like pushing," Harry said, his concentration on the ball bearings but his voice perfectly even. He'd learned to talk through these exercises without losing the thread. "It feels more like asking. Like there's a thing the world wants to do and I'm just suggesting it does it now." Bruce wrote that down verbatim. He had a growing file of Harry's descriptions of the experience of magic, because Harry's descriptions were consistently the most precise and useful data he had on the subject. The academic literature he'd managed to acquire was either vague or deliberately obscurantist, thick with terminology that seemed designed to mystify rather than explain. Harry's empirical self-reporting was far more useful. "Higher," Bruce said. "The ball bearings went up 6 more inches. Can you hold that and do something else simultaneously?" "Probably." Harry reached out with his non-dominant hand and the equipment trolley beside the testing area slid smoothly toward him, stopping at arm's reach. The ball bearings didn't waver. "Good," Bruce said. "Stop." The ball bearings dropped. Harry caught 2 of them in his left hand without looking, and grinned, a sudden, unguarded grin that showed up less often than it should have and always hit like a small explosion when it did. "I've been able to do that for weeks," Harry said. "I was waiting for you to ask. Why didn't you volunteer it?" "I wanted to see if you'd noticed the setup in the data." He nodded toward the screens. "The variance pattern. It's been there for 3 sessions." Bruce looked at the readouts. The variance pattern was there. He had, in fact, noticed it and not yet formed a hypothesis about its cause. He looked at Harry. "You were testing me," Bruce said. "A little," Harry said, entirely unapologetically. Alfred, from the upper level of the cave where he had been cataloging equipment, said without looking up, rather like someone I know. "They found the books when Harry was 9. Bruce had been expecting, or at least not excluding the possibility, that the magical world had some kind of educational infrastructure, based on Lucius Malfoy's oblique reference to a school in Scotland and the carefully maintained absence of Albus Dumbledore from any public record. The theory was confirmed when, in the process of investigating a bizarre series of events in the East End that turned out to involve neither crime nor Batman's jurisdiction but did involve a very embarrassed man in a pointed hat trying to recover an escaped enchanted ferret, Bruce had a conversation that opened several doors simultaneously. The man's name was Elphias Doge. He was old, cheerful, profoundly bad at Muggle interaction, and a close associate of Albus Dumbledore. Bruce got this out of him in under 4 minutes of conversation, which Doge clearly did not realize was an interrogation. He also got a general picture of Wizarding Society, its educational system, its geography, and the name of a bookshop in London called Flourish and Blots. He and Harry went to London on a Thursday. Finding Diagon Alley was the work of about 20 minutes once Bruce had identified the leaky cauldron. It was the one building on Charing Cross Road that his brain tried to slide away from, and Bruce had trained himself to always look harder at exactly those things. Harry found the entrance immediately, laid his hand on the brick sequence, and the wall opened for him like it had been waiting. Harry stood at the entrance to Diagon Alley and looked. He was quiet for a long moment, the kind of quiet that was a held breath rather than an absence. Around them the alley moved and glittered, the wares in shop fronts, the owls and the cauldrons, a broomstick hovering in a window display, a witch walking past with a self-following cart, the smell of something sweet and something smoky and something completely unidentifiable mixing in the air. "They're all like me," Harry said, very quietly. "Not quite," Bruce said. "But close enough." Harry turned to look at him, and for a moment, just a moment, he was entirely and completely 9 years old, eyes wide behind his glasses, the careful assessment gone and just something open and wondering in its place. Then the moment passed and the assessment came back, gentle but present. He looked at the alley. "Okay," he said. "Let's see what they know." They went to Flourish and Blots and Bruce bought the entirety of the core curriculum for Hogwarts, all 7 years of it, plus a substantial collection of advanced and supplementary texts. The shopkeeper looked at the stack with mild alarm. Harry went through the shelves with the systematic attention of someone conducting an inventory, pulling texts out, reading the first several pages of each, replacing them or adding them to the pile based on some internal evaluation process that Bruce didn't interrupt. He came to the counter with 4 additional books he'd selected himself. Bruce looked at the titles: The Standard Book of Spells, Advanced Practice, a theoretical text called Foundations of Magical Theory that the shopkeeper seemed surprised to see a child pick out, a book on magical history that was apparently not on any school list, and a thick, battered volume called Practical Wandless Technique that the shopkeeper looked at twice before ringing it up. "Can you do all of that without a wand?" Bruce asked, nodding at the last one. "I don't know yet," Harry said. "But I've been doing some version of it for years and I didn't know what it was called." He looked at the book. "I want to know what it actually is." Bruce approved of this and paid for everything and they took it all home. Harry read the core curriculum in 2 weeks. Not quickly, not skimming, thoroughly, annotating, cross-referencing. By the end of the second week he had a running list of questions that ran to 4 pages, and a separate list of what he called inconsistencies, places where the textbooks contradicted each other, or made claims that didn't hold up when tested against the theoretical framework in the Foundation's text, or described effects that Harry had been producing wandlessly and spontaneously for years but which the text stated required a wand and years of training. "They think the wand does the work," Harry said one night in the cave, sitting cross-legged on the mat with 3 textbooks open around him and his annotation notebook in his lap. "But it doesn't. It can't. The wand's a conduit. The work is happening before the wand." He tapped his notebook. "I've been doing the work without the conduit the whole time. The question is whether a conduit makes it more precise or just more legible." Bruce was watching him from the console. "Both, probably," he said. "That's what I think too." Harry looked at the Wandless Technique book. "I need a wand to test the comparison." They went back to Diagon Alley. They went to Ollivander's. The old man took one look at Harry and went to the back of the shop without saying a word, which was either instinct or information Bruce wasn't privy to. He came back with a box. Inside, 11 inches, holly, phoenix feather. Harry held it. The cave's energy sensor. Bruce had built a portable version, kept it in his jacket's inner pocket, spiked to 6 times baseline immediately. A warm gold light filled the shop briefly. The windows rattled. Ollivander was staring at Harry with an expression that was partly professional satisfaction and partly something more complicated, recognition, maybe, or the confirmation of something the old man had been expecting and wasn't sure he was happy about. "I know who you are," Ollivander said. "Most people don't," Harry said pleasantly. "The scar," Ollivander said, nodding at Harry's forehead, where the lightning bolt was partly visible above the frame of his glasses. "And the wand. The brother wand gave you that scar." He paused. "He'll want to know you have it." "Who will?" Harry asked. Ollivander looked at him with the expression of a man choosing his words. "The one who gave you the scar." Harry turned the wand in his fingers. He tested it, not a wave, just a held consideration, feeling the weight distribution, the balance. He looked at Ollivander without alarm, without theater, just with the direct and patient attention he gave everything. "He's welcome to know," Harry said. "It won't change anything." Ollivander stared at him for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, "No. I don't suppose it would." He looked at Bruce, then back at Harry. 7 galleons. Bruce paid. Harry pocketed the wand. They went home. That night Harry sat in the cave and practiced with the wand for 4 hours. His conclusion, documented in the notebook, more precise. Approximately 40% increase in fine control. No increase in raw output. Wandless remains superior for force applications. Wand superior for structured spell work. Both systems together, still figuring that out. Bruce read the notebook entry and thought, absolutely not going anywhere near a cupboard. Year 10 brought the interrogation training, and the Year 10 brought the most significant argument Bruce and Harry ever had, which lasted 3 days, was conducted entirely in the cave, and ended with both of them being right in different ways. It started because Bruce had begun including Harry in real case-adjacent work, reviewing evidence, analyzing patterns, providing a second perspective on complex investigations. Not fieldwork, not active cases, just the analytical back end, which Bruce judged low risk and high educational value. What he had not anticipated was that Harry, in reviewing the evidence files for an extortion case with Falcone connections, would identify a thread that led not to a Falcone associate but to a city official, a specific city official whose cooperation Batman had relied on for 2 years for information about GCPD corruption. Harry brought the finding to Bruce at breakfast, laid it out across the kitchen table with a calm, complete, and entirely correct analysis that dismantled a 2-year operational asset in about 15 minutes. "If I'm right," Harry said, finishing his orange juice, "then everything he's given you in the last 8 months needs to be re-evaluated for planted information." Bruce looked at the analysis. It was correct. He said, "You're right." Harry looked at him. "Are you angry?" "No. I'm annoyed that I missed it." Bruce set the pages down. "I'll handle it." "I want to be there," Harry said. "No." Harry looked at him with the particular patience of someone who had decided the conversation was not finished. "Why not?" "Because you're 10. That's not a reason. It's the reason I'm giving you." Harry said, "You trained me to find exactly this kind of pattern. You put me on the case review specifically so I'd catch things. And now I've caught something significant and you want me to step back because I'm 10. Those two positions are inconsistent." Bruce looked at him steadily. Harry looked back. The kitchen was very quiet. "The inconsistency," Bruce said, "is that I want you to develop the skill without taking the risk." "You can't always have both," Harry said. He wasn't being aggressive about it, he was being entirely reasonable, which was almost worse. "I know the risk. I can assess it. I'm not asking to go in first, I'm asking to be there." Alfred, from the counter where he was entirely too quietly making tea, did not offer an opinion, which was itself an opinion. They argued about it for 3 days. Not loudly, their arguments were never loud, because neither of them did loud as a primary register, but thoroughly, rigorously, from multiple angles. Bruce held the line on the fieldwork itself and did not budge. Harry held the line on his right to be taken seriously as an analytical partner and did not budge from that either. What they eventually arrived at was a framework. Harry would have full access to all case analysis. He would be a genuine partner in the intelligence work. He would not do fieldwork until a threshold of physical training and age were both met, age 14, Bruce said, and Harry negotiated to 13 and a half. They agreed on 14 and both of them felt like they'd won something. The city official, when confronted, confirmed everything Harry had identified. Bruce delivered this information to Harry in the cave that evening in the manner of someone paying a debt. "You were right," he said. Harry was sitting at the secondary console working on something. He looked up. "I know," he said, without smugness, just as fact. "I also understand why you held the line. I don't agree with all of it, but I understand it." Bruce sat at the main console. He looked at Harry for a moment. "When did you get this reasonable?" "Alfred," Harry said. "Obviously." They worked in companionable silence for an hour, and it was during that silence that Bruce thought, with the particular clarity that came to him sometimes in quiet moments, that whatever he had been afraid of when he'd brought a 4-year-old home from an alley in the East End, whatever shapeless parental anxiety had been operating under all the training and the rigor and the work, it had been the wrong thing to be afraid of. He had been afraid of breaking something. What he'd actually been doing, apparently, was the opposite. He didn't say any of this. He filed it. Harry's 11th birthday fell in July, and one morning in early August, the owl arrived. It came through the study window at 7 in the morning, which was a window Bruce was fairly certain had been closed, making its arrival moderately impressive from a logistics standpoint. It was a large tawny owl, formal and composed in the way of animals that know they are performing an official function, and it landed on the desk beside Harry's cereal bowl and extended its leg with the gravity of a bailiff serving a summons. Harry untied the letter. He read it. He turned it over and read the back. He set it down and continued eating his cereal for a moment. "Hogwarts," he said. Bruce was at the opposite end of the table with coffee and the Gotham Gazette. "I know." Harry looked at him. "You were expecting this." "For about 2 years." Harry looked back at the letter. It was on heavy parchment, written in green ink, the Hogwarts crest at the top, a crisp, official, entirely unaware document that had no idea it was landing on a desk where the recipient had already studied its entire 7-year curriculum. "Do you want to go?" Bruce asked. Harry turned the letter in his hands. He looked at it the way he looked at a new case file, with interest, with assessment, with the forward-leaning quality of someone who had just identified the next problem and was ready for it. "Yes," he said. "I want to see what they're actually teaching. I want to understand the institutional structure from the inside. I want to know what Dumbledore is." He paused. "And I want to meet people my own age." He said this last one slightly quietly, and Bruce let it land without comment, which was the right thing to do. "You'll go," Bruce said. "And you'll take everything we've built here with you." He set down the Gazette. "Harry." Harry looked at him. "Don't hide what you are," Bruce said. "Not for anyone. Not the magic, not the training, not what you know. Don't hide it." Harry held his gaze for a moment. He nodded once, a sharp, complete nod, the same nod he gave when they established a rule in the cave that he intended to follow absolutely. "There's one more thing," Bruce said. "Dumbledore. He's going to want to manage you. He has a plan for you. I've been building the picture for years and I don't have all of it, but enough. He sees you as a piece on a board. He'll be subtle about it." Harry said, "I know." Bruce looked at him. "I've known something like that was coming for a while," Harry said simply. "Someone put me in that alley. Someone put me with the Dursleys. Someone had a reason." He tapped the letter on the table. "I've been wondering when I'd get close enough to see the board properly." The corner of his mouth moved. "Now I will." Alfred appeared in the doorway. He looked at the letter. He looked at Harry. He looked at Bruce. "Well," Alfred said. "I suppose we'd better get to Diagon Alley. The school list will require a second wand at minimum, and I expect the cauldron specifications have changed since last year's edition." Harry said, "I already have the cauldron specs. Third-year size is optimal for the advanced practical work regardless of what the first-year list says." Alfred said, "Of course you do," in a tone of profound, entirely affectionate exasperation. Harry grinned, the sudden, full, unguarded grin, and pushed back from the table and went to get his shoes. Bruce sat at the breakfast table with his coffee. Outside, Gotham was loud and golden in the August morning, the way it got sometimes before the heat of the day took over. He looked at the Hogwarts letter Harry had left on the table. He looked at the owl, which was still perched on the desk edge with the expectant quality of an owl waiting for a reply. He picked up the letter. He read it once, all the way through. It was addressed, he noticed, in the customary way, not to Harry Potter, Wayne Manor but to Harry Potter, the cave entrance, Wayne Manor, Gotham City, USA. Which meant someone knew about the cave. He looked at the owl. "Tell your headmaster," Bruce said, that we've received the letter." The owl blinked once, with enormous dignity, and left through the window it had arrived through, closed, demonstrably, since Bruce had checked after it came in. He looked at the closed window for a moment. He finished his coffee. There was, as always, a great deal of work to do. Chapter 3, Platform 9 3/4. The Hogwarts Express left at 11 o'clock, and Harry arrived at King's Cross at 10:15 with one trunk, one owl in a cage. Alfred had insisted on the owl, citing institutional expectations, and the importance of not appearing entirely alien on the first day, which Harry had accepted as tactically sound, and the particular quality of alertness he carried into every new environment, which was neither nervousness nor excitement but something more like a clean, forward-leaning readiness. Bruce was with him. He'd arranged the London trip around a Wayne Enterprises board meeting, which was the kind of scheduling efficiency that Alfred approved of in theory, while privately noting that it meant Bruce had attended the board meeting for 40 minutes before handing the remainder to his proxy and leaving. Harry had not commented on this. He'd noted it and filed it in the category of things Bruce did that meant more than Bruce would acknowledge. They moved through the station together, Harry with his trunk on a trolley, Bruce in civilian clothes, dark jacket, no tie, the particular brand of unremarkable that very recognizable people sometimes achieved through deliberate plainness. Several people looked at Bruce anyway, the way people always did, some processing the recognition and some just responding to the physical presence, the quality of attention Bruce carried that was impossible to fully dim. Harry paid no attention to any of this. He was watching the station. "Platforms 9 and 10, he said, reading the boards. "So the barrier should be on the dividing pillar." "Should be," Bruce said. "Have you been here before?" "Once. About 3 years ago. I was following a lead." Harry looked at him sideways. "Did you go through?" "No. I watched 12 people walk into a brick pillar and then evaluated my priorities for the afternoon." Harry almost smiled. He found the pillar between platforms 9 and 10, stood in front of it for a moment, and then walked through it at a brisk, confident pace without looking like he was doing anything unusual, which was the correct technique and which he had identified as the correct technique from the theoretical principle rather than experience, which was also characteristic. The platform on the other side was, a lot. He stood still for a moment and let the information come in. The scarlet engine, the steam, the crowd, families, children in robes, owls and cats and toads, the particular controlled chaos of a mass departure. The noise was significant. The magical energy output of the assembled crowd was something the portable sensor in his jacket pocket was already struggling to categorize, reading in the amber range on the miniaturized display he checked with a glance. He noticed several things in rapid sequence: a family of redheads, 7 of them, possibly more, a statistical improbability even by large family standards, clustered near the middle of the platform, a girl with exceptionally large hair and very new robes consulting what appeared to be Hogwarts, a history while her parents, clearly Muggle, watched the scene with the pleasant bewilderment of people at a very strange theme park, a pale, blonde boy surrounded by 2 substantially larger boys, performing the specific social geometry of someone who expected the space around him to clear, which it mostly did, and a man in a lime green bowler hat who was trying and failing to look like he wasn't looking at Harry. The man looked away when Harry looked back. Harry noted him and moved on. Bruce had come through the barrier behind him and was now standing slightly to his left, scanning the platform with the systematic efficiency that Harry had grown up watching and had largely internalized. Their eyes met briefly. Bruce gave the smallest nod. "I've got the same read." The man in the lime green hat was official. Some kind of ministry observer. Which meant they'd been expected. "Go," Bruce said. "Find a compartment." "I'll put the trunk on." "I can put the trunk on." "You can." "I'm doing it." "Go." Harry went, because the argument had a time limit imposed by the train's departure and because Bruce's expression was doing the thing where it said "I am aware this is slightly irrational and I'm doing it anyway," which Harry had learned not to fight directly. He moved down the train looking for a compartment and running a secondary scan of everyone he passed, the way he did in any new space, quick, systematic, non-invasive, building the database. Most of the children were nervous in the ordinary first-day way. Some were performing confidence for an audience. 2 boys near the front carriage were genuinely comfortable, older students, prefect badges catching the light. He found a compartment 2/3 of the way down that was empty. He took the window seat facing the direction of travel, because facing the direction of travel gave you the longest reaction window to anything approaching from outside, and also because he'd always found traveling backwards slightly nauseating, and he set his bag down and looked out at the platform. The girl with the large hair was trying to manage a very heavy trunk while simultaneously not losing her place in Hogwarts, a history. She was not succeeding at both simultaneously. Her parents were attempting to help with the trunk and she was attempting to direct them while reading, and the whole enterprise had acquired the gentle chaos of a project run by committee. Harry watched this for a moment. Then he went out. "You'll lose your page if you keep trying to do both," he said. The girl looked at him. She had quick brown eyes and the expression of someone who was already mentally composing a rebuttal. "I've memorized the relevant sections," she said. "Then you don't need the book open." She closed it, with some reluctance. She looked at the trunk, then at Harry. "Do you know a levitation charm?" "Yes." "So do I," she said, with a quality that suggested this was important to establish. "I've been practicing since I got my letter." She looked at the trunk. She raised her wand, new, like his, recently purchased, and said, "Wingardium Leviosa," with perfect enunciation and excellent wrist form, and the trunk rose smoothly and obediently, and she directed it toward the train with the pleased focus of someone whose practice had paid off exactly as expected. Harry watched. "Good technique," he said. She looked at him with the slightly suspicious pleasure of someone receiving an unexpected compliment and not entirely sure what to do with it. "Thank you. Hermione Granger." "Harry Potter." She stared at him. Not the wide-eyed, stepping-back stare he'd read about in the historical accounts of his name's effect on the wizarding world, but a different kind of stare, the kind that meant rapid mental cross-referencing. "You're actually here," she said. "Were you expecting me not to be?" No, I've read about you. Quite a lot, actually." She stopped herself, visibly editing for social appropriateness. "I mean, your history is in several books." "I know. Most of them are wrong about at least half of it." He picked up the book she'd been holding. "Hogwarts, a history. This one's better than average. The chapter on the founders has some good primary sourcing." Hermione stared at him again, this time with an entirely different quality, the look of someone who has just discovered that the person they thought might be a curiosity is actually going to be interesting. "You've read it?" "Twice." He handed the book back. "I've got a compartment 2/3 down. If you want." Her parents, who had been following this exchange with the amiable blankness of people at a party where they don't speak the language, exchanged a glance. Her mother looked at Harry with the specific attention of a parent evaluating a new social contact for her child. Harry met her eyes, straight and clear. She seemed to find what she was looking for, because she relaxed fractionally and touched Hermione's arm. "Go on, then," she said. Hermione said her goodbyes with the anxious love of a child who was trying to be brave about leaving and doing a good job of it. Harry stepped back to give them privacy. He looked back along the platform and found Bruce, who had stowed the trunk and was now standing near the barrier, watching him. Not with the surveillance quality, not the Batman watching, the other kind, the one that had no name but had been there since the kitchen table on the first morning. Harry held up a hand. Bruce nodded once. The whistle blew. Hermione Granger talked for most of the first 2 hours, which suited Harry well because he was primarily listening, to her, to the corridor outside the compartment, to the accumulating picture of the wizarding world as it looked from inside, which was already yielding useful information that the textbooks hadn't covered. She was, he had established within the first 20 minutes, genuinely exceptional. Not in the performed way, not the kind of smart that existed to be witnessed, but in the structural way, the kind where the intelligence was load-bearing, where she actually needed it to navigate the world rather than just displaying it. She had read everything available on Hogwarts and Wizarding Society and magical theory, she had strong opinions on all of it, and she expressed those opinions with a directness that most people apparently found overwhelming and that Harry found straightforwardly refreshing. She also asked good questions. Not performance questions, real ones, the kind where she was actually waiting for the answer rather than the confirmation. "What's it like?" she asked, somewhere in the middle of the second hour. "Knowing you're, famous?" Harry said. "I was going to say the boy who lived, but yes." Harry looked out the window at the countryside going by. They were through the suburbs now, into green rolling hills, the kind of landscape that didn't look anything like Gotham and was pleasant partly for that reason. "I didn't know until I was 9, he said. "Before that I was just a kid who made things move by accident and got told it was wrong." Hermione frowned. "Who told you it was wrong?" "People who were scared of it." "That's ridiculous." "It's a gift." She stopped, audibly aware she was lecturing at someone about their own experience, and made a visible effort to recalibrate. "Sorry. I just think it's absurd that anyone would." "They were afraid," Harry said simply. "Fear makes people want to put things in boxes. If it's in a box, it's manageable." He paused. "I grew up learning that things outside boxes are mostly just things you haven't categorized yet." Hermione looked at him with the cross-referencing look again. "Who taught you that?" "My guardian." "What does he do?" Harry considered the honest answer and its various framings. "He investigates things," he said. "Finds patterns. Solves problems. Like a detective?" "Something like that." The compartment door opened at this point, which was timing Harry noted as either coincidental or deliberately theatrical, and a boy with red hair and a smear of something on his nose leaned in and said, "Is there room?" "Everywhere else is full." Harry looked at the compartment, which had 4 seats and was currently occupied by 2 people. "Plenty of room," he said. The boy dropped into the seat across from Hermione with the comfortable disregard for personal space of someone with many siblings. "Ron Weasley," he said. "Harry Potter." Ron's eyes went immediately to Harry's forehead, the lightning bolt scar, partly visible above his glasses, and then came back with the self-conscious effort of someone who has just reminded themselves not to stare. "Right," he said. "Brilliant." "Hermione Granger," Hermione said. "Hi." Ron pulled out what appeared to be homemade sandwiches and ate with the appetite of a large, hungry teenage boy. He looked at Harry between bites with the direct, unguarded curiosity of someone who hadn't yet decided to be subtle about anything. "You're the one who beat you-know-who, then." "I was 1 year old at the time," Harry said. "I didn't really do much." "You survived." "Technically I was present." Harry watched Ron eat. "What year are you?" "First, same as you." "My brothers are here though, Fred and George are 4th year, Percy's prefect." Ron said prefect with the weary tone of someone who had been hearing about it for months. "My whole family's Gryffindor. Every one of us." "Do you want to be?" Harry asked. Ron opened his mouth. Closed it. Frowned in the way of someone who has never been asked this particular question and isn't sure it's one they're allowed to have an answer to. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it'd be weird not to be." "That's not the same thing," Harry said. Ron looked at him for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he grinned, broad and genuine and slightly rueful. "No," he said. "I suppose it's not." He took another sandwich. "What about you? What house do you think you'll be in?" Harry had thoughts about this but he said, "We'll see." The compartment door opened again, not a tentative knock this time, just the door coming open, which was a social choice, and the blond boy from the platform was there, with his 2 shadows flanking him in the corridor. He looked at Harry with the particular expectation of someone accustomed to being looked at in return. "Harry Potter," he said, with the emphasis of someone checking an item off a list. I'm Draco Malfoy. Harry looked at him. He clocked the quality of the entrance, the timing, the calculated casualness, the performance of ease. He clocked the two larger boys behind him, who were muscle rather than company. He clocked Draco's eyes, which were sharp and wanted something and were working to look like they didn't. Draco, Harry said. Something flickered in Malfoy's eyes at the first name response, a micro-adjustment, recalibrating to a situation that wasn't behaving the way expected. I could help you, Malfoy said. Navigate things. The wizarding world, it's complicated. There are right people and wrong people to know. His eyes moved to Ron, a fraction, and something dismissive crossed his face. Some families aren't worth your time. Ron went slightly red. Harry didn't look at Ron. That's a generous offer, Harry said. His voice was entirely pleasant and entirely flat, the register he used for statements that had already been evaluated and decided. I'm good. Malfoy's easy expression held for a moment and then shifted, finding a new configuration, not angry, more like interested against his will. You know who my father is? Lucius Malfoy. He and my guardian have met several times. Wayne Enterprises and Malfoy interests overlapped briefly about 5 years ago. Harry looked at Malfoy with the direct, unalarmed regard he gave everyone. Your father's a careful man. He chose his words when he talked about the magical world very deliberately, said almost nothing, and still managed to tell me more than he intended. You're doing something similar right now. The corridor was very quiet for a moment. Draco Malfoy looked at Harry with an expression that had gone through several rapid iterations and landed somewhere Harry hadn't expected, not hostile, not humiliated, but genuinely uncertain, the look of someone encountering a variable their model didn't account for. Fine, Malfoy said. He held Harry's gaze for a beat. Then he turned and went, his shadows following, and the compartment door clicked shut. Ron let out a breath. That was, he stopped. How do you know Lucius Malfoy? I don't. My guardian does. Harry leaned back against the seat. Malfoy's not stupid. He'll recalibrate. He was being awful, Hermione said. He was doing what he's been taught. It's not the same thing. Harry looked at the window. He was also doing it specifically in front of me, which means he wanted me to see it, which means he wanted something from my reaction. He paused. He didn't get it. Hermione and Ron looked at him and then at each other, the look of two people simultaneously registering that they have just met someone who is going to be consistently surprising. The witch with the sweets trolley knocked at that point and solved the social arithmetic by giving everyone something else to focus on, which Harry suspected was the trolley witch's actual primary function in the Hogwarts Express ecosystem. Hogwarts, arriving in the dark, lit by its own impossible warmth, rising above the Black Lake as the fleet of boats moved across the glassy water, Hogwarts was something else. Harry looked at it and felt something he didn't immediately categorize, something that wasn't the cave's clean purposeful hum or Wayne Manor's solid, earned familiarity, but something that had an age to it, a depth, like a chord struck by something very old and very serious. Magic lived in those stones at a concentration that made his portable sensor completely useless, it maxed out and stayed there. He put the sensor away. Sometimes you just had to use your own instruments. It's real, Hermione said, very quietly, from the boat beside his. Very, Harry agreed. Neville Longbottom, who was in their boat and had been steadily radiating anxiety since the platform, looked at the castle with the expression of someone trying to decide whether beauty counted as a mitigating factor for terror. He was holding his toad, Trevor, who had already escaped twice on the train and been retrieved both times through the combined effort of the compartment, with the careful grip of someone determined not to lose him again. It's very big, Neville said. It's bigger inside, Harry said. Neville looked at him. How do you know? It's architecturally impossible from the outside. The internal space is significantly larger than the external dimensions allow. That means expanded interior charms of considerable magnitude, which implies a footprint inside that doesn't map to the outside. He looked at the castle's silhouette. Probably 2 to 3 times the visible size. Neville processed this. That's either very reassuring or more frightening, he decided. I think it's interesting, Harry said, and Neville looked at him with the specific expression of someone deciding to tentatively trust a person who uses the word interesting about things that are objectively overwhelming. Hagrid, who had shepherded the first years across the lake with the gentle efficiency of a large man who had done this many times, deposited them at the castle entrance with a knock that shook the door, and a stern-faced woman with a pointed hat and the compressed energy of someone who had also done this many times, and who maintained exacting standards about how it was done, opened the door and looked at them. Professor McGonagall. Harry had done his reading on the Hogwarts faculty. McGonagall, Transfiguration, head of Gryffindor, regarded by former students with the specific mix of respect and affection that attached to teachers who were demanding and fair in equal measure. Her eyes moved across the first-year crowd with the practiced efficiency of a person categorizing a situation, and when they reached Harry they stopped for just a fraction of a second, a very well-controlled fraction, but Harry had been reading micro-expressions for 4 years. She knew who he was and had an opinion about the context of his arrival that she was not going to express in front of the students. He respected this. She gave them the waiting in the antechamber speech, which was delivered with the brisk precision of someone who considered unnecessary words a form of structural weakness, and then went through to the Great Hall. Harry looked at the ceiling, vaulted, old, already enchanted with the moving candles, and then looked at his fellow first-years, who were managing their anxiety in various ways. Ron was slightly green. Hermione was doing controlled breathing and appeared to be mentally reviewing something. Neville had located Trevor in his pocket again and was holding the pocket from the outside. What do you know about the sorting? Ron asked Harry, low, over the crowd noise. It's a hat, Harry said. A magically sentient hat with roughly 1,000 years of accumulated consciousness. It reads your mind and places you based on your dominant characteristics. Ron stared at him. How do you know that? Books. Which books? Most of them. Ron turned this over. Does it hurt? The reading? Apparently not. More like a conversation. Harry paused. I had a conversation with the hat before we came in. Ron blinked. What? I'm making that up, Harry said. Ease up. Ron punched him lightly on the arm with the automatic reflex of someone used to a house full of brothers, and then looked alarmed at himself for having done it, and Harry grinned, and Hermione looked at them both with the expression of someone deciding whether this was charming or concerning and landing on charming, barely. The Great Hall was exactly as overwhelming as advertised and more. Harry walked in with the first years and processed it in layers, the enchanted ceiling matching the cloudy October sky outside, the 4 long house tables, the high table where the faculty sat. He moved along the faculty table with his eyes, reading faces, noting positions, logging names against profiles. Flitwick, small and bright-eyed. Quirrell, defense against the dark arts, his appearance noted in Harry's file with several question marks because Quirrell's known academic record and his current visible presentation didn't fully align. McGonagall, watching the first years with the focused attention of someone conducting an assessment. Snape. Harry looked at Snape for a moment longer than the others. Severus Snape, potions master, head of Slytherin, known Death Eater turned informant, complexity layered on complexity, a man whose file Bruce had helped Harry build from whatever sources were available and whose presence at Hogwarts told Harry several things at once about Dumbledore's particular style of chess. Snape's eyes found Harry in the crowd of first years with the directness of someone who was looking for him specifically, and there was something in that look, dark and layered and not quite readable, that Harry filed as, history, complicated, not yet categorized. And then there was Dumbledore. He was at the center of the high table and he radiated a quality that Harry had no better word for than weight, not physical weight, the weight of accumulated presence, of someone who had been significant for a very long time and had grown comfortable with it. His eyes were blue and sharp behind half-moon spectacles and they found Harry in the crowd with an ease that said, I always know exactly where you are. Harry met his eyes. He held them. Dumbledore smiled, warm, genuine, the smile of someone who genuinely liked what they saw. Harry held his gaze without the smile and without hostility, just with the clear attention he gave to everything that mattered. Something moved in Dumbledore's eyes. Not alarm, he was too controlled for alarm. More like the recalibration Harry had seen in Malfoy's face, but quieter and much more experienced. The smile stayed, but something behind it had shifted. Harry looked away. He looked at the sorting hat on its stool. The hat sang. Harry listened to it with genuine attention, analyzing the song for structural information rather than entertainment value, the 4 houses, the characteristics, the framing of each. He noticed that the song's framing of Slytherin emphasized ambition and cunning without explicit negative loading, which was a choice, and that the framing of Gryffindor led with bravery but the ordering of its secondary characteristics was interesting, and that Ravenclaw's entry had the fewest words, as though the hat considered Ravenclaw the most self-explanatory case. Granger, Hermione. Hermione went to the stool with the specific tension of someone who had been mentally rehearsing this moment. The hat went on her head. Barely 10 seconds, and then, Gryffindor. Hermione's face broke open. She went to the Gryffindor table and sat down and looked back at the crowd with bright, relieved eyes. Several names later, Longbottom, Neville. Neville walked to the stool still holding Trevor in his pocket, placed the hat on his head with his free hand, and after a longer deliberation, 45 seconds, Harry clocked, was placed in Gryffindor, where he arrived to genuine warmth from the Weasley twins who had apparently taken an early interest in him. Malfoy, Draco. The hat touched his head and said Slytherin before the brim had fully settled, which told Harry something about the depth of Draco Malfoy's dominant characteristics and also about the hat's familiarity with the Malfoy line. Potter, Harry. The hall went quiet in a way that was qualitatively different from the standard between names quiet, a held breath quality, a collective attention that Harry could feel as an almost physical pressure. He walked to the stool with the same pace and quality of movement he always had, sat on the stool, and settled the hat on his head. The voice was immediate, intimate, and entirely unexpected in how interested it sounded. Well. This is unusual. A pause, felt rather than heard, the quality of genuine assessment. I haven't had a mind quite like this in some years. Several things at once, always. Patterns and systems, very strong. Where do you put things you don't know yet? In a file, Harry thought. Pending further data. Yes. I see that. Another pause, longer. Bravery, considerable, but it doesn't feel like bravery to you, does it? It feels like logic. Courage without drama. A quality that might have been appreciation. Cunning, yes, very much. Ambition of a particular kind, not for status, for understanding. And intelligence, well. A warm, amused quality. Ravenclaw would be very happy to have you. As would Slytherin, for the right reasons. As would Gryffindor. A beat. What do you want? Harry thought about it honestly. He looked through the darkness under the hat's brim at nothing and thought, the stone is somewhere in this building, Quirrell is compromised, Dumbledore has a plan that involves me as a piece rather than a player, and I need to be where the information is densest. And personally? The hat pressed, gently. Not strategically. Harry thought about Hermione's face when she heard Gryffindor. He thought about Neville walking up still holding his toad. He thought about Ron in the boat asking if the sorting hurt. There too, he thought. Yes, the hat said. I thought so. And then, louder, to the hall, Gryffindor. The Gryffindor table responded with genuine warmth. Harry took the hat off, replaced it on the stool, and walked to the Gryffindor table and sat down across from Hermione, who looked at him with the bright, pleased expression of someone whose preferred variable had just resolved correctly. Ron arrived a few minutes later and dropped into the seat beside Harry with a full-body exhale of relief. Gryffindor, Ron said. Obviously. Obviously, Harry agreed. Fred and George Weasley, from further down the table, leaned forward in unison. Potter, one of them said, Fred, Harry would eventually determine, though the determination took longer than he'd have liked to admit. "We've heard of you." "Most people seem to have," Harry said. "We've got a bet," George said, "about which of the teachers you'll horrify first." "I've got Snape." "Fred's got McGonagall." "Those are both reasonable guesses," Harry said. They grinned in the synchronized way that identical twins who had been honing a skill together for years grinned. Harry made a mental note about the Weasley twins that boiled down to, useful, unpredictable, probably trustworthy, definitely dangerous to underestimate. At the high table, Dumbledore rose for his start-of-term remarks and Harry listened to him with the specific attention he reserved for people he intended to understand completely. The remarks were warm, faintly eccentric, and almost entirely without direct information content, which was itself informative. A man this experienced with words who chose to use them for warmth rather than substance was a man who did his substantive communication elsewhere, through other channels, with different tools. Snape was watching Harry. Harry could feel it the way you could feel being followed. He didn't look at Snape. He filed it. Quirrell, at the far end of the high table, was not watching Harry. He was watching his plate, which given what Harry knew about the current state of Quirrell's situation, which was, admittedly, incomplete, was its own kind of data point. People who were hiding something significant either watched the thing they were hiding from too much or too carefully not at all. Quirrell was doing the latter. Harry ate his dinner and talked to Ron about Quidditch, because Ron needed to talk about Quidditch the way some people needed to decompress after stressful events, and Harry had done enough research on the subject to hold the conversation and also because Ron's description of the Chudley Cannon's persistent underperformance was genuinely amusing on a structural level. He answered Hermione's questions about his reading background with the specific portions of the truth that were navigable in this context. He watched the hall. He was the most comfortable person at the first-year table, which was either reassuring or alarming depending on how you thought about it. After dinner, Dumbledore stood again and delivered a list of announcements that included, partway through and in the same even tone as the note about the Forbidden Forest, a warning that the third-floor corridor on the right-hand side was out of bounds to students, and that anyone who went there could expect a very painful death. Ron leaned over. "He's joking," he said. "About the death. Right?" "No," Harry said. Ron looked at the headmaster. He looked at Harry. "You seem very calm about that." "There's something up there," Harry said. "Something significant enough to be stored in a school instead of somewhere with actual security, which implies either resource constraints or deliberate placement as a kind of bait." He ate a roast potato. "I'm going to need more information before I form a working hypothesis." Hermione, on his other side, had been listening. She looked at him with the expression that was becoming familiar, cross-referencing, assessing, landing. "You're going to investigate it," she said. "Yes. That's extremely dangerous." "Probably." "I want to help," she said, with the tone of someone making a statement they have already decided is non-negotiable. Harry looked at her. He looked at Ron, who had the expression of someone who had already had the decision made for him by events and was making his peace with it. "When I have a working hypothesis," Harry said. "Then we'll talk." Hermione looked satisfied. Ron looked resigned in a way that also looked like he didn't mind very much. Later, filing up the moving staircases to Gryffindor Tower, which moved in a way that Harry found both logistically interesting and mildly irritating, the portrait of the fat lady demanding the password and Percy Weasley delivering it with the self-importance of a person for whom passwords were a significant form of authority, Harry walked through the portrait hole and into the common room and stood for a moment in the warm light, in the noise and the movement of students finding their footing in a new year. It smelled like a fireplace and old books and something faintly botanical he couldn't identify. He thought about the cave. He thought about Alfred's kitchen. He thought about Gotham's particular darkness and the way the waterfall sounded late at night when the work was going well. He thought about the letter addressed to the cave entrance, and Dumbledore's smile at the high table, and the third-floor corridor. He went to find the boys' dormitory, set his bag on the bed with the best sightlines to the door, and got out his notebook. Day 1, he wrote. Quirrell confirmed compromised, behavioral profile matches. Stone is real and is here. Dumbledore placed it deliberately. The trap is set. Question, for whom? He paused. He tapped the pen on the page. He knows I'm here. He knew before the owl. He knows about Bruce and the cave, the letter confirmed that. He's been watching for years. He has a plan for me. Another pause. He hasn't made a move yet. Waiting for me to make one first. He looked at the dormitory ceiling. Fine. Let him wait. I'll choose the moment. He closed the notebook. He lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about everything he'd seen today with the steady, patient thoroughness that Alfred had once described, affectionately and accurately, as, that thing you do where you look like you're asleep but you're actually running a small newspaper. Down in the common room, he could hear people talking, the fire crackling, the castle settling into its night sounds. Tomorrow there would be classes. Professor McGonagall's transfiguration. Snape's potions. The third-floor corridor, which he'd walk past but not enter yet, not until he had the pattern clearer. He picked his wand up from the nightstand and turned it in his fingers. Holly and Phoenix Feather, 11 inches. Brother to the wand that had given him the scar. The other wand was out there somewhere, in pieces or reassembled, waiting with the patience of a thing that didn't need to breathe. Harry set his wand down. He closed his eyes. He thought about what Bruce had said at the breakfast table, with the morning coming through the Wayne Manor windows and the Hogwarts owl still perched on the desk with its enormous dignity. Don't hide what you are. Not for anyone. I'm not planning to, Harry said quietly, to the dormitory ceiling, to no one. He slept well. Chapter 4, The Philosopher's Stone. The first week of classes established several things. McGonagall's transfiguration opened with the professor turning her desk into a pig and back again without apparent effort, which Harry appreciated as a pedagogical choice. Lead with the impressive thing, establish the ceiling early, let the students understand where they were going before you explained the steps. She then asked the class to attempt turning a matchstick into a needle. Most of the first years produced matchsticks with slight silvery tips. Hermione produced a needle in 4 attempts. Harry looked at the matchstick for a moment, thought about the theoretical framework he'd built over 2 years of independent study, and produced a perfect needle on the first try. McGonagall looked at it. She looked at Harry. Her expression did the controlled fraction thing again. She picked up the needle and examined it. Wait, finish, the eye of it. Mr. Potter, she said. Professor. Have you done this before? Not this specific exercise. I understand the underlying principle. A beat. Stay after class, please. Ron, beside him, mouthed told you in the direction of his matchstick. Harry flicked his pen at him without looking. After class, McGonagall asked Harry a series of questions with the precise, building structure of someone constructing a profile rather than having a conversation. She asked about his prior education, his magical training, the nature of his preparation. Harry answered honestly and without embellishment, which he'd found was usually the most efficient approach with people who were smart enough to detect embellishment anyway. When he mentioned Alfred's home curriculum and Bruce's training methodology, McGonagall's expression shifted slightly, the fraction shift, again. Your guardian, she said. Bruce Wayne. Yes. He's a muggle. He is. And he trained you in, detective work. Observation. Analysis. And martial arts and chemistry and engineering and a few other things, Harry said. The magical theory I mostly did independently. Alfred helped with the structure. McGonagall was quiet for a moment. She had the look of someone recategorizing something significant. Then she said, briskly, in the manner of someone returning to professional footing, your classwork will likely present you with limited challenge. I expect you to engage seriously regardless. I won't tolerate coasting. I don't coast, Harry said. I look for the edges. She looked at him. The edges of what a subject can actually do. The textbooks describe what's been established. I'm more interested in what hasn't been established yet. Another beat. Then, you'll find this table after dinner on Thursdays useful. She handed him a card, extra credit sessions, advanced transfiguration theory, currently attended by 2 fifth years and a 7th year. If you can keep up. Harry looked at the card. Can I bring Hermione Granger? McGonagall's composure slipped, just briefly, barely visible, into something warm. Yes, she said. You may. Snape was a different kind of problem. Potions opened with Snape walking through the dungeon in the particular manner of a man who owned every room he entered by right of being the most complex person in it, which, Harry acknowledged, was probably true. His opening monologue was practiced and deliberately theatrical, designed to establish dominance through the controlled delivery of impressive information, and it worked on most of the class, who went appropriately tense and attentive. Then Snape looked at Harry. Potter, he said. Our new celebrity. His voice had the flat, precision-cut quality of a scalpel rather than a bludgeon. Tell me, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? The class went very quiet. Harry recognized the question as a test of a specific kind, not whether he knew the answer, but how he delivered it. Too eager and he was performing. Too slow and he was struggling. The calibration was the point. Draught of living death, Harry said. One of the most powerful sleeping potions known. The asphodel and wormwood combination creates a base that suspends biological function at the cellular level rather than the neurological, which is why it's significantly more potent than wormwood alone. Snape's eyes narrowed fractionally. Where would you look if I told you to find a bezoar? Stomach of a goat. Though sourcing matters, Afghani mountain goat produces the highest alkaloid concentration and therefore the most effective antidote properties. A pause. Snape looked at him with the dark, layered look Harry had filed on the first night, history, complicated, not yet categorized, and it had acquired a new dimension now, which Harry read as, "You are not what I expected and I have not yet decided what to do with that." What is the difference, Snape said, between monkshood and wolfsbane? Same plant. Aconitum. Also called aconite. Harry paused. The name difference is regional and historical rather than botanical. Snape held his gaze for a moment. Then he turned to the class and said, "Unlike our celebrity, the rest of you have clearly not bothered to open your books," which was an interesting response because it was simultaneously a dismissal and the absence of the attack Harry had been expecting, and the absence told him something. Snape didn't like Harry, or more precisely, Snape had a complicated, pre-existing relationship with the idea of Harry that had nothing to do with Harry himself. But Snape was also a man whose actual values, beneath the performance, ran toward competence and rigor. He could dismiss Harry's fame. He couldn't dismiss preparation. Harry logged this and moved on. The defense against the dark arts classroom smelled wrong. Harry noticed it the first time he walked in, not dramatically wrong, just a faint undertone beneath the standard classroom smells, something that his instincts flagged before his analytical mind caught up with why. It was the smell of something that didn't belong in a place inhabited by a person who was what Quirrell's surface profile said he was. Something older. Something that reminded him, distantly and disconcertingly, of the energy signature his portable sensor had first recorded the night he found the cave. He kept that observation entirely to himself. Quirrell's classes were, as advertised, a mess. His stutter seemed to come and go with an inconsistency that would have looked like nerves to anyone who hadn't specifically studied deception. His choice of topics was scattered in a way that looked random but followed a pattern Harry could see. He circled around defense against dark creatures and hexes while consistently avoiding anything that touched on the dark arts themselves, on Lord Voldemort, on curses of power. Like a man who couldn't get too close to a subject without flinching. On the third day, Harry arrived early to Quirrell's classroom and stood at the front for 30 seconds before anyone else arrived. The smell was strongest near the door to the small office behind the front desk. He went back to his seat before anyone came in. By mid-October, Harry had built a working picture. He kept it in his notebook in the cipher he and Bruce had developed together over 2 years, not an unbreakable cipher, nothing was unbreakable, but one that would take time to work through, and time was usually sufficient protection for a working document. He reviewed it on a Sunday afternoon in a quiet corner of the library while Hermione worked through advanced arithmancy theory at the table across from him and Ron tried to finish his herbology essay while intermittently falling asleep. The stone was in the third-floor corridor. He'd confirmed this through 3 separate lines of evidence, an overheard conversation between 2 older Slytherins that confirmed the corridor had been magically sealed since summer, a conversation with nearly headless Nick about the castle's history of secure storage that had, without Nick realizing it, narrowed the location considerably, and a survey of the castle's energy output patterns over 2 weeks using the portable sensor, which showed a consistent concentration in the North Tower. Third floor that was distinct from the ambient magical signature. The stone itself he understood. He'd found enough alchemical literature to build a solid profile, an object capable of both producing the elixir of life and transmuting metal to gold, created by Nicholas Flamel, approximately 665 years old. The value to someone who wanted to return from a state of reduced physical existence was obvious. The appeal of hiding it in a school was less obvious until you looked at it the way Harry was looking at it. Dumbledore wanted it found. Not by just anyone, by Harry. The corridor warning had been theatrical and specific, the kind of prohibition that functioned as an invitation for people who didn't respond to prohibitions, and Harry was clearly expected to be exactly that kind of person. The stone was bait. The question was whether the trap was designed to catch Voldemort, to test Harry, and Harry thought this was the most likely option, given what he knew about Dumbledore's chess methodology, to accomplish both things simultaneously by having Harry catch Voldemort. The instrument designed to catch another instrument. Harry made a note, he wants me to find it. Find it on his timeline, in his way, confirming his narrative. The Boy Who Lived, Round 2. I find it my way, on my timeline, which removes the narrative control. He tapped his pen on the page. Quirrell makes his move before Christmas. Behavioral pattern suggests increasing pressure. The stutter is getting less consistent, which means the performance is degrading. 3 weeks, maybe 4. He looked up. Hermione was watching him over her arithmancy text with the expression of someone who had been watching for a while and was deciding whether to ask. Quirrell, Harry said. I know, she said. Harry looked at her. How long? The smell in the classroom, she said. I've been trying to identify it. There's a passage in Dark Artifacts and their indicators about residual presence markers. Signatures left by certain kinds of entity. The smell matches. She paused. It's been getting stronger. Harry looked at her for a moment. He thought about being 9 years old in the cave and spotting a cross-reference that Bruce had spent 4 minutes building toward. He knew the particular pleasure and the particular weight of being the person who saw things early. Yes, he said. It's getting stronger. Voldemort, Hermione said, in the clear, direct voice of someone who had decided that the name being unsayable was a social construction she didn't intend to honor. On Quirrell somehow. On him, Harry confirmed. I haven't established the specific mechanism yet. Hermione closed her arithmancy text. She folded her hands on it in the manner of someone convening a meeting. Tell me what you know. Harry told her. He laid it out with the same clean, building structure he used with Bruce, what he knew, how he knew it, what he'd inferred and from what evidence, what remained uncertain and why. Hermione listened with total attention, and twice she interjected with pieces of information that Harry didn't have, one from Hogwarts, a history's less read appendices, one from a conversation she'd had with a Ravenclaw 5th year about castle security charms, that slotted cleanly into the picture and sharpened it. Ron woke up somewhere in the middle of this, looked at them both, and said, "Oi, when did this get serious?" And then, when Harry gave him the 10-second summary, went from sleepy to alert with the speed of someone whose older brothers had apparently included chess move and response reflexes in the informal curriculum of growing up Weasley. "So what do we do?" Ron said. "We go before Quirrell does," Harry said. "We remove the option of letting the trap spring on Dumbledore's schedule." "That's going to make Dumbledore very unhappy," Hermione said. "Yes. You're not concerned about that." "I'm informed about it," Harry said. "There's a difference." Hermione looked at him with the assessing look. Then she nodded once, a sharp, complete nod, exactly like the one Harry gave Bruce when they established a rule he intended to follow. He noticed this and felt something warm and slightly surprising about it. "When?" she said. "When Quirrell moves," Harry said. "We'll know." "I'll know, I've been watching the pressure pattern. 2 to 3 weeks. Maybe sooner." Ron pulled his herbology essay toward him, then pushed it away again. "I'm absolutely failing herbology," he said, to no one in particular. "I'll help you with it tomorrow," Hermione said, automatically. "I know you will," Ron said. "That's the only reason I'm not more worried about it." Quirrell moved on a Tuesday night in November, which was 12 days ahead of Harry's revised estimate, which told Harry that the pressure from whatever was riding Quirrell had increased faster than the observable indicators had suggested. He knew it was happening because at 9:47 p.m. he woke up from a dead sleep with every instinct he had running at full capacity, the way they did when a situation shifted from potential to active, and he sat up in bed in the dark dormitory and his scar hurt. Not the abstract, narrative scar hurt of the accounts he'd read. An actual, specific pain, localized and directed, like a compass needle spinning toward magnetic north. He was dressed and out of the dormitory in under 2 minutes. He knocked on the fourth-year girls' dormitory door, which violated several rules and produced an irritated response from someone who was not Hermione, and then Hermione opened the door already mostly dressed in the manner of someone who had also woken up with an acute sense of situational change. "Now?" she said. "Now," Harry said. Ron materialized from the boys' dormitory behind Harry, shoes not fully tied. "I heard the door," he said, by way of explanation. They went. The corridors at night were a different Hogwarts, quieter, older, the torchlight lower and the shadows deeper, the castle's ambient magic more present without the daytime crowd. Peeves was somewhere on the second floor making noise about something. Mrs. Norris appeared at the end of a corridor on the second floor and Harry looked at her and she looked at him and then, with the specific decision-making process of a cat encountering something she'd prefer to reclassify as not her problem, she turned and went the other way. Harry noted this. He wasn't sure what to do with it. The third-floor corridor. The door was already open. Not broken open, opened, by someone with either the password or the ability to override it. Quirrell had been here first. Inside, Fluffy, the three-headed dog, fast asleep. Harry looked at the harp in the corner, still playing, barely, the last notes dying as they walked in. He looked at the trapdoor. He looked at Hermione and Ron. "I go first," he said. "Harry," Hermione started. "I go first because I know the most about what's down there and because I have the fastest reaction time and because I'm not negotiating this. You two follow on my signal." Hermione set her jaw but didn't argue. This was, Harry had come to understand, Hermione's version of agreement, the silent, compressed lips decision that the logic was sound even when she didn't like it. He dropped through the trapdoor. The devil's snare caught him. He felt it immediately, tendrils, fast and reflexive, responding to warm presence in the dark. He went still, completely still, which was the reflex response Bruce had trained into him for any restraint scenario, stillness first, assessment second, action from information. The plant loosened fractionally in response to his stillness. He felt its pressure pattern, its direction of growth, and then he produced a wandless burst of warmth, not fire exactly, something adjacent to fire, heat without combustion, and the plant recoiled and he dropped through and landed cleanly. He called up. "Clear. Come through. Don't struggle." Hermione came through and conjured fire with her wand. Ron dropped through after her, swearing quietly at the plant. They moved. The winged keys were a logic problem with a physical component. Harry looked at the swarm, identified the right key by age and where pattern in under 30 seconds, and summoned it wandlessly while Hermione watched with an expression that she had apparently decided was not the moment to ask questions about. Ron had found a broomstick. Harry shook his head. The key came to his hand. He unlocked the door. You just summoned it, Ron said. We can debrief later, Harry said. Move. The chess game. Harry looked at it and thought about the cave and early mornings at a small board across from Bruce, and thought about sacrifice and positional advantage and the difference between protecting your pieces and moving them with purpose. Ron, he said. Ron was already looking at the board. His eyes were moving across it with the focused quality of someone whose best skill had just been called on, the specific alertness of someone who never looked more alive than when they were doing the thing they were actually best at. Knight to e5, Ron said. Then bishop covers the rook. No, wait, he walked around the board, looking, his lips moving slightly. Knight to e5. Then we have a clear path if someone takes bishop position. He looked at Harry. I need to be the knight. You don't have to, Harry said. I know I don't have to. I'm saying I should. I can see the line from there. I can end it in 4 moves if I'm the knight. He paused. I'll get knocked out. Probably. But I'll get knocked out having won the game. Harry looked at him. Ron had the expression of someone who had chosen a thing clearly and completely, the fear present but secondary to the decision. For moves, Harry said. For moves. Hermione's the bishop. I'm the castle. They took their places. The game played. Ron made his moves with the calm, deliberate accuracy of someone who had been playing chess since he was old enough to sit up straight, and 3 moves and Harry could see the line he'd mapped, the way the board was collapsing toward a single resolution, and on the 4th move Ron's knight was taken and Ron hit the stone floor and didn't get up and Hermione made a sound that wasn't a scream but was the compressed shape of one. Harry checked him. Pulse strong. Breathing steady. Unconscious, not injured. He looked up at Hermione. He's all right, Harry said. Stay with him. Harry, Hermione. He held her gaze. I need you here so I can go there without worrying about both of you. That's not me protecting you. That's me allocating resources correctly. Do you understand? She looked at him with her eyes bright and her jaw set. I understand, she said tightly. I know you do. He went through the door. The potion room, a logic puzzle embedded in a rhyme, bottles in a line, only 2 allowing passage. Harry read the rhyme, assessed the bottles, size, warmth, smell where he could detect it, the intuitive weighting of a dozen small indicators, and identified the forward potion in under a minute. He drank it. Cold fire through his chest. He went through. The final chamber was everything the censor had been screaming about since he walked through the trapdoor. The stone's energy output at close range was extraordinary, layered, complex, warm in a way that was different from any magical signature he'd mapped before, like a thing that had been accumulating meaning for 6.5 centuries and was saturated with it. Quirrell was standing in front of the mirror of Eriste. He turned when Harry came in. The stutter was gone. His face had the clean, stripped-back quality of someone who had stopped performing, and what was underneath the performance was colder and older and considerably more dangerous than anything the performance had been designed to cover. Harry Potter, Quirrell said. I wondered if you would come. I know, Harry said. He looked around the chamber, the mirror, the door behind Quirrell, the room's dimensions, the exits. He looked at Quirrell. You've been letting me see the pressure building for the last 2 weeks. You moved faster than the observable indicators should have let you, which means you wanted me down here specifically. Not just down here, you wanted me here before Dumbledore knew it was happening. Quirrell looked at him. You're very calm. I'm interested, Harry said. That's different from calm. Most children would be frightened. I'm not most children. Harry looked at the mirror. You can't get the stone from the mirror. It was designed to show what the viewer most desires, and what you most desire is to have the stone, which means the mirror shows it to you perpetually but won't deliver it because the want and the having are different states. You've been standing here for, he checked his read of Quirrell's physical state, the slight depletion that came from sustained magical effort, the tension in his posture. An hour. Maybe more. Quirrell was very still. His eyes had acquired a quality that Harry was filing actively, building a picture of the thing behind Quirrell's eyes that wasn't Quirrell. The boy is clever, said a voice that wasn't Quirrell's. It came from Quirrell and also from somewhere else, a voice with age and intelligence and a particular quality that Harry recognized without having heard it before, the quality of something that had been reduced to essence, stripped of everything except will and intelligence and the capacity for harm. It was, he thought, the most purely purposeful voice he'd ever heard. Quirrell began to unwrap his turban. Harry watched, because watching without reacting was the right response to a developing situation when reaction before full information was available was the primary error to avoid. The turban fell away. On the back of Quirrell's head, a face looked at Harry. He looked at it directly. He looked at the eyes, red, without the human geography that gave eyes their readable quality, but not without intelligence. Remarkable intelligence, actually. The kind that had been burning for decades on a single point. Harry Potter, said Voldemort, through Quirrell's mouth, with the quality of someone who had been waiting a long time for an appointment that had finally arrived. You are not what I expected. Most people say that, Harry said. Most people say it because they underestimated you. I say it as an observation. The red eyes moved across him with the clinical attention of someone conducting a serious assessment. I expected the boy from the stories. Frightened. Deferential. Raised in ignorance of his own significance. A pause. You are none of those things. No, Harry agreed. Who made you what you are? I did, Harry said. Some help. The Muggle. Something in Voldemort's voice, not contempt, not quite. Something more complicated. The specific friction of encountering a variable that didn't map to your existing framework. A Muggle made the most powerful magical child of the age into a detective. Among other things. Harry looked at the face on the back of Quirrell's head with the direct, unalarmed attention he gave to everything that mattered. You want the stone. I want to live, Voldemort said, simply. I have always wanted to live. It is the most basic and honest desire possible. I want a body, Potter. I want to exist in the world rather than haunting the edge of it. I want what every living thing wants. He paused. You must understand this. Ambition of this kind, wanting to persist, you must understand it. I understand it, Harry said. That's not the same as helping you. Why not? Voldemort said, and it was a genuine question, Harry noticed, the tone of someone who actually wanted the answer, who was accustomed to being able to understand his opposition and was finding the usual methods insufficient. What do you owe Dumbledore? He placed you with people who left you in an alley. He designed you as an instrument. He is doing now exactly what I did, using you as a piece. I know, Harry said. A pause. You know. I've known for about 2 years. Harry looked at the mirror. Dumbledore has a plan that involves me sacrificing myself in some way. Possibly literally. I don't know the details yet, I haven't been close enough to the board to read it fully. But the shape of it is visible. Voldemort was quiet for a moment, the red eyes steady. And yet you came here. I came here because you were going to get the stone. Not because Dumbledore wanted me to. Harry looked at Quirrell, at the strain in Quirrell's face, the cost of the possession, the man being spent from the inside. He felt something about that, something he filed under this is wrong with the clarity of a rule rather than an emotion. I came here because taking the stone gives you a body, and a body means you start killing people immediately, and I'd rather have this conversation now while you're at limited capacity than later when you're not. Voldemort looked at him with an expression that was doing something Harry couldn't entirely read, something that was either respect or the closest analog to respect that something like Voldemort could manage. The mirror, Voldemort said. Get the stone from the mirror, Potter. I can see you're capable of it. I won't ask you to give it to me, only to get it. What you do with it after is your choice. Harry looked at the mirror. He thought about what the mirror showed. It showed you what you most desired. He'd read about it. He'd thought about it, in the abstract way he thought about things he anticipated encountering, the preparation that was a permanent feature of how he moved through the world. He walked toward it. He stood in front of it and looked. The mirror showed him, not Lily and James, not the expected tableau. The mirror showed him the cave, and Bruce at the console, and Alfred in the kitchen, and the window of the study in the morning, and the drawing on the table from when he was 4 years old, the one with home written at the bottom in green crayon pencil. And then it showed him something else, a future shape, not specific, not a destination, just a direction. A world where the board was understood and the pieces moved honestly. A world where the things worth protecting were protected. Not by being a piece. By choosing to play. He felt the stone in his pocket. He looked down. It was there, it had moved from the mirror's surface into his pocket, because he hadn't been trying to use it, only to understand it, and that was apparently the mechanism of Flamel's design, and Harry thought, clever old man, Nicholas Flamel, to build that into the protection. He turned around. I have it, he said. Quirrell moved. He was fast, faster than his teaching persona had suggested, the speed of someone whose inhibitions had been mostly replaced by something without inhibitions. He had Harry by the wrist before Harry had fully tracked the movement, and the contact was, something happened with the contact. The same thing that had always happened when Harry's magic responded to threat, not a controlled response, a reflexive one, deep and old and not interested in Harry's tactical priorities. The pain hit Quirrell at the point of contact. Not gradually. Immediately, completely, a full contact response that Harry had never produced deliberately and had no framework for controlling in real time. He could feel the burn where his skin met Quirrell's hand and he could feel Quirrell experiencing something considerably worse, and he had the clear, cold thought, this is the protection his mother left him, and it is not something I can calibrate in this moment. Quirrell screamed. He let go. Harry stepped back and Quirrell fell, and the thing wearing Quirrell's head was, leaving, the red eyes moving through the chamber with the quality of something retreating to minimum viable form, and as it passed Harry it stopped. The cold was extraordinary. Impressive, said Voldemort's voice, from the formless dark. Not angry. Not defeated in the way of something that didn't know it would return. Just, assessing. The last beat of a conversation that had revealed information on both sides. You'll keep the stone. Yes, Harry said. You haven't decided what to do with it. Not yet. When you decide, Voldemort said, from the retreating dark, know that my interest in you is not what Dumbledore's is. He wants a weapon. I want, a pause, to understand what I'm dealing with. I have never met anyone like you, Potter. A beat. I will not make that mistake again. And then the cold was gone and the chamber was just a chamber and Quirrell was on the floor and not moving and Harry was alone with a stone in his pocket and the particular quiet of a situation that had resolved into the next situation. He crouched beside Quirrell. Checked him. Alive, barely. He conjured a containment ward around him, not perfect, wandless containment wasn't his sharpest tool, but solid enough, and stood and looked at the chamber and thought. He took the stone out of his pocket. He held it. It was warm. It felt like something very old that had been waiting patiently for someone who wasn't going to misuse it, and he was aware this was anthropomorphism but he felt it anyway. He put it back in his pocket. He went back through the potion room and through the chess chamber. Ron was conscious, sitting up against the wall with his head in his hands and Hermione beside him, and both of them looked at Harry with the specific expression of people who had heard screaming from behind a door, and Harry looked at them and said, "It's done. Ron, can you walk?" "Yeah," Ron said, which was probably optimistic based on his color, but Ron said it with the confidence of someone who had made a decision about what they could do rather than an assessment of their actual physical state. "Good. We go up. We find Dumbledore. Before he finds us," Hermione said. "He already knows," Harry said. "He's been watching the whole time. He let it get this far because he wanted to see how I'd handle it." He moved toward the exit. "Now we find out what he does with the information." Hermione fell in beside him and Ron came behind them, limping with the dignity of someone who had decided the limp was beneath his notice, and they went back up through the trapdoor and Fluffy's room and the third-floor corridor and into the castle proper, and the castle around them was entirely dark and entirely quiet, and Harry walked through it with the stone in his pocket and thought about Voldemort's voice in the dark saying, "I will not make that mistake again." Not a threat. A statement of intent to improve. He filed it. At the top of the first-floor staircase, standing in the low light of a single torch, Albus Dumbledore was waiting. He looked at Harry. His eyes went to Harry's pocket, a brief, precise look, confirming the weight distribution, the slight rectangular outline. He looked at Harry's face. Harry looked back. "You went ahead of my timeline," Dumbledore said. His voice was gentle, as it always was, and Harry had by now developed enough exposure to Dumbledore's voice to hear the thing under the gentleness, not coldness, but weight, the pressure of decades of careful management of very large things. "I went when the situation required it," Harry said. "Not when the narrative required it." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. He looked at Harry with the sharp blue eyes and the half-moon spectacles and the accumulated presence of someone who had been the most significant person in most rooms for most of his life. "May I see it?" he said. "No," Harry said. A beat. Something moved in Dumbledore's eyes, not anger, the recalibration again, the third time Harry had seen it, and it was developing a quality now, an accumulating weight of a man who was finding that his board had a piece on it that didn't move the way pieces moved. "It will need to be destroyed," Dumbledore said. "To prevent Voldemort from, I know what it needs," Harry said. "I'll discuss it with Nicholas Flamel directly. He made it. He should have the decision about what happens to it." "Harry, I'll write to him tonight," Harry said, in the tone he used when a decision was made rather than a negotiation was in progress. He met Dumbledore's eyes. "Professor." He said it clearly and without hostility and without any performance, just the clean establishment of a position. "I understand what you've been doing. I understand why. We'll talk about it when I know more of it." He paused. "Ron needs the hospital wing." He walked past Dumbledore and along the corridor toward the hospital wing, and Ron and Hermione followed him, and behind them Dumbledore stood in the torchlight and watched them go with an expression that, if Harry had been looking back, which he wasn't, would have been very difficult to read. Not anger. Not defeat. Something more like, well, this is going to require a different approach entirely. Harry turned the corner and the torchlight fell behind them, and ahead the hospital wing door was lit and warm, and Madame Pomfrey was already opening it, as though she had been told to expect them. Harry walked in. He helped Ron to a bed. He watched Madame Pomfrey's efficient, no-nonsense care with appreciation. He sat in the chair between Ron's bed and Hermione's, and he reached into his pocket and touched the stone, once, and then took his hand away. He thought about Voldemort in the dark, retreating but not gone, saying, "I will not make that mistake again." He thought about Dumbledore in the corridor, recalibrating. He thought about Bruce at the cave console at 2 a.m, saying, "Don't hide what you are. Not for anyone." Outside the hospital wing windows, the Hogwarts grounds were dark and cold, and the sky above them was full of stars, the kind of sky you didn't get in Gotham, too many lights for stars in Gotham. Harry looked at it for a moment through the glass. Then he got out his notebook and started writing. Chapter 5, The shadow and the board. The letter to Nicholas Flamel went out at 6 in the morning, carried by a school owl Harry had selected based on its apparent competence. He had, over the course of the term, developed a working taxonomy of the Hogwarts owls based on reliability, speed, and the specific quality of focused professionalism that distinguished a good messenger from an enthusiastic one. The letter was written in the cipher he and Bruce used, on the reasonable assumption that Dumbledore read the school correspondence and the less reasonable but still probable assumption that Dumbledore could break most conventional codes. The cipher bought time if not permanence. He wrote to Bruce as well. A different letter, plain English, deliberately sparse, the details he'd committed to a secondary notebook page he'd removed before sending, the letter itself reading in summary as, "Stone secured. Situation developing. All three of us fine. Coming home at Christmas. We need to talk." He considered the last line and then left it, because understatement was the language he and Bruce communicated best in, and "we need to talk" from Harry meant roughly what a 5-page detailed incident report meant from anyone else. He sent both letters before the rest of the tower was awake and then went down to the common room and sat in the chair nearest the fire with his notebook and worked through everything he'd observed in the chamber, the stone's energy signature, Voldemort's behavioral profile, the specific mechanism of what had happened when Quirrell grabbed his wrist, which remained the least understood variable in the night's events and was therefore the one demanding the most immediate attention. His mother had done something when she died. Not just died, done something. Something deliberate, something that had left a mark on him that interacted with Voldemort in a way that had nothing to do with Harry's training or his magic in any conventional sense. Something old and non-theoretical, a protection that operated at a level underneath the systems he understood. He wrote, "Love as operative magic. Not metaphorical. Actual mechanism. Lily Potter made a choice and the choice left a physical trace in my biology or my magical signature or both. Quirrell burning at contact is repeatable. I need to know if it's triggered by my intent or by Voldemort specifically or by proximity to possession. Controlled test required." He looked at that last line and crossed it out, because controlled test in this context meant deliberately touching something possessed by Voldemort, and that was the kind of experiment he could design in theory and decline to run in practice. He moved on. Dumbledore's timeline. He'd gone off it deliberately and he stood by the decision. Going on Dumbledore's timeline would have meant letting the situation develop further in ways he couldn't fully predict, would have meant ceding control of the encounter's parameters. But the consequence was that Dumbledore now knew something about Harry that he hadn't known before, which was that Harry was not going to be managed through narrative. The response to that information was the next variable to model. He wrote, "He'll want a conversation. He'll frame it as care, concern, the warm headmaster version. He'll use the conversation to find out what I know and calibrate how much I know. I need to be ready for that without shutting it down completely. I need information from him as much as he wants it from me. Controlled exchange. Show enough to get enough." He thought about this. He thought about what Bruce had said once, in the context of an interrogation technique rather than a conversation. The goal of a controlled exchange is for both parties to leave believing they got more than they gave. That's where the information actually lives, in the gap between what someone thinks they disclosed and what they actually disclosed. He'd have to be careful. Dumbledore had been doing controlled exchanges for approximately a century. Hermione came down at 7:15 with her hair still fighting its morning battle and her eyes already sharp. She sat across from Harry without preamble, tucked her knees up under her on the chair, and said, "Tell me about the protection. What he said about your mother." "How do you know what he said?" "I inferred it from your face when you came back through the door. You had the look you get when you've added a significant variable to an existing model." She paused. "And Quirrell's hands. The burns." Harry looked at her. He thought about the cross-referencing expression and the way she'd produced the Hogwarts, a history appendix information the night of their planning session. He thought about the fact that she'd identified the smell in Quirrell's classroom independently and sat on it, not bringing it to him until she had enough context to be useful rather than just alarming. "My mother sacrificed herself," he said. "Deliberately, completely. Voldemort offered her a choice and she refused it and died protecting me. The choice left a protective charm. Old magic. Pre-theoretical. He turned the pen in his fingers. It means Voldemort, or anything tied to him, anything he's possessing, can't physically touch me without significant pain. Possibly damage. Hermione thought about this with the focused, building quality of her best thinking. That's a blood magic construct, she said eventually. Ancient. Pre-Hogwarts formalization. The texts barely cover it because she frowned. It's not reproducible, strictly speaking. It requires actual sacrifice, actual love, and the specific combination of those things at the moment of death she paused. It's not something anyone can engineer. No, Harry agreed. He can't touch you. Not without significant consequences. Which changes the tactical picture for direct encounters. Harry looked at the fire. It also means every indirect approach he takes is more significant. If he can't confront me physically, he'll use other people, other levers, situations I can't burn my way out of by proximity. Hermione was quiet for a moment. You're not frightened of him, she said. No. Should you be? Probably, from a rational risk assessment standpoint, Harry said. He's extraordinarily capable, highly intelligent, has been planning his return for over a decade, and has a demonstrated willingness to kill anyone in his way including children. He paused. But fear as an emotional state tends to narrow option set. I'd rather stay in the wider set. Hermione looked at him for a moment with the expression that had moved, over the course of the term, from cross-referencing and assessing to something more settled, something that looked like being seen clearly and finding it not uncomfortable. You sound like your guardian, she said. That's not surprising, Harry said. He's been talking at me since I was 4. Is he coming? She asked it carefully, the way she'd learned to ask things she wasn't sure were welcome. At Christmas. Harry looked back at the fire. He'll want a full debrief. He'll also want to meet Dumbledore, which should be interesting for everyone involved. The corner of Hermione's mouth moved. I'd pay a significant amount to watch that conversation. You won't have to pay anything. I intend to be present for it. She laughed, quick and genuine, the laugh she produced when something was actually funny rather than socially funny, a distinction Harry had learned to notice because it was one of the things that made Hermione's company consistently interesting. Of course you do, she said. Ron came down at 8 with the bearing of someone who had decided that a limp was not going to be his defining characteristic for the day, which it mostly wasn't, though he was moving carefully and Madame Pomfrey had given him a look that morning that suggested she would not object to a second visit. Chess, Ron said, sitting heavily in the third chair. I beat a 1,000-year-old enchanted chess set. You did, Harry said. That's actually brilliant, when I think about it. It was, Harry said, and meant it completely, and Ron registered this with the particular pleasure of genuine recognition, not surprise, just receipt, like something landing in a place it was supposed to land. Right, Ron said. What did I miss while I was unconscious? Dumbledore's conversation arrived 3 days later, on a Friday afternoon. The invitation was delivered by McGonagall in the corridor outside Transfiguration with the specific neutrality of someone who was passing along a message without a mandate to editorialize. The headmaster would like to see you at your convenience this evening, Potter, she said, and then, because she was McGonagall, I'd suggest sooner rather than later. Harry went at 7. The gargoyle admitted him without requiring the password, which told him the meeting had been arranged rather than merely proposed, the distinction between a headmaster's open door and a headmaster's carefully set stage. He walked up the spiral staircase and knocked and entered. The office was exactly the kind of room that communicated a philosophy. It was full, instruments on tables, portraits of previous headmasters on the walls, Fawkes on his perch watching Harry with the particular quality of a genuinely old creature's attention that was different from merely old things. Harry looked at Fawkes and Fawkes looked back and there was a moment of mutual assessment that was oddly equal. Dumbledore was at his desk. He rose. He gestured toward the chairs by the fire with the natural hospitality of someone who had done this 10,000 times and still meant it. Harry. Please, sit. Harry sat. He looked at the office and thought about the Sorting Hat's voice saying Slytherin would be very happy to have you for the right reasons. Dumbledore sat across from him. He looked at Harry with the warm, serious, father-shaped attention that Harry had been expecting and had prepared for, not prepared to resist, prepared to navigate. First, Dumbledore said, I want to say that what you did 3 nights ago required considerable courage. And considerable skill. I mean that without reservation. Thank you, Harry said. I also want to say, Dumbledore continued, with the quality of someone making a precise and deliberate transition, that you placed yourself in significant danger by going ahead of my assessment, Harry said. Ahead of my assessment. Not yours. He said it without sharpness, just clearly. I judged the situation required action at that moment. I made that assessment on the best available information. You may disagree with the assessment, but the authority for the decision was mine. Dumbledore held his gaze. His expression was doing a complicated thing, not anger, not offense, but the specific quality of a man who was very good at conversations encountering a conversational mode he didn't have a standard response to. You are, he said, slowly, not what I expected, Harry. I'm told that fairly often, Harry said. By whom? Most recently by Voldemort, Harry said, and watched Dumbledore's response carefully. The name landed. Dumbledore controlled his reaction well but not perfectly. The slight tightening at the name's use was involuntary and told Harry that Dumbledore had not expected Harry to be the kind of person who used the name. You spoke with him, Dumbledore said. At length. He's extraordinarily intelligent. Frightened of death in the way that people are frightened of the thing they've organized their entire existence around avoiding. He made a coherent case for his own position. Harry paused. He also told me you want to use me as a weapon. He was trying to flip me, obviously. But the underlying observation wasn't wrong. Dumbledore was very quiet for a moment. The fire crackled. Fawkes shifted on his perch with a soft sound. That is a very complicated thing to address, Dumbledore said finally. I know. I'm not asking you to address it tonight. Harry looked at him steadily. I'm telling you that I know it's part of your thinking. Not because I think you're cruel, I don't. I think you're a person who's been fighting an enormous war for a very long time and has made decisions about what's necessary that I don't have enough information to fully evaluate. He paused. But I will have enough information eventually. And I'd rather we get there through conversation than through me finding out sideways. Dumbledore looked at Harry for a long moment. The sharp blue eyes were doing something that Harry couldn't entirely read, something between pain and respect and the genuine, unperformed emotion of a man being seen more clearly than he expected to be. The stone, Dumbledore said, with the quality of someone changing to ground they had more control over. I've written to Nicholas Flamel. I'm waiting for his response before making a decision. Harry, the stone cannot fall into Voldemort's hands, yes. I agree with that entirely. Harry reached into his pocket. He set the stone on the arm of his chair, just placed it there, casually, in the firelight, and watched Dumbledore's eyes follow it. It's not in Voldemort's hands. It's in mine. And it will stay in mine until I've spoken with the person who made it and who has the most legitimate claim to decide its fate. Dumbledore's eyes moved from the stone to Harry's face. His expression had arrived at something Harry had not seen there before, not the recalibration, not the weight, but something more personal. Something that looked, oddly, like the first stage of genuine trust, the moment just before you decide to believe something you hadn't planned to. You remind me, Dumbledore said, quietly, of several people. The combination is, he stopped. He seemed to decide something. May I ask about Mr. Wayne? You may ask, Harry said. He trained you well. He trained me honestly, Harry said. Which isn't the same thing but includes it. Does he know about, Dumbledore gestured, a comprehensive gesture that seemed to mean all of this. The wizarding world. The prophecy. Harry went still. Not visibly still, the stillness was interior, the snap to attention of something important landing. The prophecy. He'd built toward the existence of a prophecy from the evidence, the deliberateness of Dumbledore's placement, the specific shape of his interest in Harry, the particular quality of the narrative that had built up around him. He'd inferred it without confirming it. He held his expression exactly where it was. He knows about the wizarding world, Harry said. The prophecy we haven't discussed yet. Dumbledore looked at him carefully. He'd noticed the micropause, Harry was certain of it, Dumbledore noticed everything. The question was whether he'd use the information or hold it. He held it. Which told Harry something too. There is a prophecy, Dumbledore said, and his voice had changed, quieter, more careful, the tone of someone handling something fragile. Made before your birth. I will tell you its content when I believe you are ready to, tell me now, Harry said. Harry, Professor. Harry looked at him. The entire architecture of my life has been shaped by something I haven't been allowed to know. Dumbledore, he used the name without title deliberately, and felt the slight shift in the room. I'm not asking as a child asking to be allowed something. I'm asking as the person the prophecy is about, who has the primary claim on information about himself. He paused. You said I remind you of several people. I think one of them is my mother. I think she would have asked the same way. The fire crackled. Something moved across Dumbledore's face that was old and complicated and private. He looked at Harry for a long time. Then he said, the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The office was very quiet. Harry held the words in his mind. He turned them over. He ran the analysis with the clean, cold efficiency he used for everything, parsing the language, the conditions, the specific framing of the power the Dark Lord knows not. He doesn't know what the power is, Harry said. No. I have a theory. So do I, Harry said. And if my theory and yours are the same theory, we have a problem with the interpretation. He looked at Dumbledore. If the power is love, if it's what my mother did, what left the protection, then the implication of either must die at the hand of the other isn't that one of us needs to be killed. It's that the power needs to be applied. Fully applied. He stopped. He thought about what that meant. He thought about Quirrell burning at contact. You think I have to die? Dumbledore's face was entirely still. You think there's a piece of him in me, Harry said. From the night he killed my parents. You think I have to die to destroy it? The stillness in Dumbledore's face was its own answer. Harry picked up the stone from the arm of his chair. He turned it in his fingers. He put it back in his pocket and stood up. I'll work on it, he said. Dumbledore looked up at him from the chair. Harry, I'm not angry, Harry said. And he meant it, not performing equanimity, actually not angry, the way he was never angry at storms for being storms. It was information. Significant, uncomfortable information about his own situation, but information. You should have told me years ago. But I understand why you didn't. I don't have to agree with your reasoning to understand it. He looked at Dumbledore. But we're past that point now. I need everything you have. Maps of the Horcruxes, yes, I know what they are, I worked it out from the theoretical literature, I'll explain my reasoning if you want it. The prophecy in full. Your intelligence on Voldemort's return timeline. Whatever Tom Riddle's school record says. Dumbledore stared at him. I'll come back tomorrow, Harry said. Bring the relevant files. He walked to the door. He turned back once. Thank you for telling me the prophecy, he said, genuinely. That mattered. He left. He stood on the spiral staircase for a moment in the dark and pressed his back against the stone wall and breathed. His hands were entirely steady. His pulse was slightly elevated. He breathed. He was 11 years old and the universe had just confirmed that it had been designed, in some meaningful sense, to try to kill him. And the man who'd known this all along had been moving pieces on a board with that knowledge, and Harry was one of the pieces. He breathed. He thought about Bruce in the cave the first night they worked together, when Harry had found the cross-reference in 30 seconds, and Bruce had said, "Good catch." Just that. And then they'd moved on. He moved on. Bruce arrived 4 days before Christmas on a Thursday. Harry was in the library when he came, running theoretical models on the Horcrux problem, which Dumbledore had confirmed with the kind of relieved exhaustion of someone who had been carrying enormous weight alone and found someone competent to share it with. Bruce came through the library door escorted by a deeply uncomfortable-looking Hufflepuff prefect who looked at the tall man in the dark jacket and clearly had no idea what protocol applied. Bruce looked at the prefect with the polite disregard he extended to most non-essential variables and said, "Thank you," in the tone that concluded an interaction, and the prefect left. Bruce looked at the library. He looked at Harry. Harry looked up from his notes. He said, "You should have told me you were coming today specifically. I told you Thursday. There are 2 Thursdays between now and Christmas. I meant this one." Bruce sat down across from him in the manner of someone who had evaluated the available chairs and selected the one with the best sightlines. He looked at Harry the way he always did on returns from the field, the inventory check, quick and thorough, from the habit of needing to establish all clear before anything else could proceed. "I'm fine," Harry said. "You went down a trapdoor," Bruce said. "Without me knowing the exact timeline. I went when the situation required it." "I know. I read your letter." Bruce looked at the notes spread across the table. "Show me." Harry showed him. He laid it out the way Bruce had taught him, what he knew, how he knew it, the inferences and their evidence, the gaps and why they existed. He walked Bruce through the Horcrux theory, through the prophecy, through his assessment of Voldemort's likely return timeline and methods. He described the chamber encounter in the clean, sequential detail of a debrief, his voice level and precise, and Bruce listened with total stillness and total attention, which was how Bruce always listened and which Harry had grown up understanding as one of the forms care took in people who were better at attention than at expression. When Harry finished, Bruce was quiet for a moment. "The prophecy," he said. "Yes. He's known since before you were born." "Yes. And placed you with people who," Bruce stopped. His jaw tightened fractionally, the specific compression Harry associated with Bruce controlling something considerable. "He placed you in that alley." "Not directly. Indirectly. The Dursleys were always going to be inadequate and he knew it, and whether he intended the specific outcome of me ending up in Gotham or whether that was outside his model," Harry paused. "I think it was outside his model. I think he assumed I'd stay in their house and be kept ignorant and small and then be deliverable when the time came." Bruce looked at him. The controlled jaw had resolved into something quieter, something that had come to a conclusion and settled on it. "He's going to want to run this his way. He's already trying. And he's genuinely capable. I don't want to lose access to what he knows." Harry looked at the table. "I want to negotiate with him. Keep the channel open, get the information I need, maintain enough of my own operational independence that he can't finalize his version of the plan." Bruce was quiet. He looked at the notes. He looked at Harry. "You said Voldemort told you Dumbledore wants a weapon. And that the underlying observation wasn't wrong." "Yes. How are you?" Bruce said. Not "how is the case, how are you," in the specific register he used for the question that was distinct from the operational check, the one that had been emerging with increasing frequency over the past 3 years and that Harry had learned to answer honestly rather than efficiently. Harry considered it honestly. "I'm all right," he said. "The prophecy is significant and uncomfortable and I need more data before I'll know what all of it means." The piece of Voldemort question is, concerning. He paused. I'm not afraid. I'm oriented. Bruce looked at him for a moment. What does oriented mean? Means I know where I'm standing. Means the board is visible even if not all the pieces are placed. Harry met his eyes. Means I've done this before. Not this specifically, but, finding out that the situation is bigger and more serious than the available information suggested. I've done that. We've done that. Bruce said, we have. And it's always more manageable once you see the whole board. It's manageable now, Bruce said, with the quiet certainty of a statement rather than a reassurance. I have the full picture. We worked the problem. It was the right thing to say and it was said in exactly the right way and Harry felt it land with the weight of something genuine, something that had been genuinely earned over 7 years of exactly this, working the problem, together, with honesty about what they knew and what they didn't. There's something else, Harry said. The stone. Harry pulled it out and set it on the table between them. Bruce looked at it. He reached out and his fingers hovered near it without touching. The portable sensor in his jacket pocket was clearly registering something significant based on the slight shift in his attention. Flamel wrote back, Harry said. He pulled the letter from his notebook, small, precise handwriting on parchment that was several centuries older than Hogwarts standard stationery. He wants it back. Not destroyed, he says destruction is Dumbledore's preference and he understands the reasoning but the stone is his life's work and he has rights to the decision. He paused. He also said that after a certain point he and Perenelle are ready to die. He said he has enough life and what he wants now is the time to be done with it, which he found clarifying rather than frightening. Bruce read the letter. He set it down. You're going to return it to him? Yes. Dumbledore can be consulted but not given the final decision. He won't like that. I know. Harry put the stone back in his pocket. He'll like me being dead less, though. And if he needs me functional for his plan, he'll accommodate the things I require. Bruce looked at him steadily. You're leveraging your own necessity. It's the most available tool. A long pause. That's the right call, Bruce said, and Harry heard the slight reluctance in it, not disagreement, just the particular friction of a person who didn't enjoy acknowledging that a child in his care had learned to use their own life as a negotiating chip, even when the child was right. Dumbledore wants to meet you, Harry said. I know. He sent me a letter. Harry stared at him. When? November. Before the situation. Bruce produced a folded piece of parchment from his inner jacket pocket. It was politely worded and completely uninformative. I was waiting to understand the full context before responding. Harry took the letter and read it. It was, as described, politely worded and completely uninformative, Dumbledore expressing a hope that they might meet at Harry's earliest convenience, framed in the warm, heavy-handed wisdom elder manner that Harry had by now identified as Dumbledore's social register for first contact with parties he intended to bring onto his side. He's been cautious about you, Harry said. He should be. He doesn't know what to do with a muggle who trained me. No, Bruce said. He designed a situation for a child who had no resources and no information. He has to recalculate for one who has both. He took the letter back. I'll meet him tomorrow. Without you. Harry looked at him. Why without me? Because some of what I want to say to him I can say more effectively without you present. His voice was even. And because watching your guardian express a specific set of concerns to your headmaster while you're sitting in the room is not a comfortable experience, and I'm not putting you through it. I know you can handle it, Bruce said. I'm choosing not to make you. He held Harry's gaze. Different thing. Harry held the look for a moment. Then he nodded. The sharp, complete nod. Bruce and Dumbledore's meeting lasted 2 hours. Harry did not try to find out what was said, because he'd given his word on the question of the room and he honored given words as a category of commitment that operated independently of convenience. He spent the 2 hours in the Gryffindor common room with Ron and Hermione, playing chess. Ron beat him twice, which Harry allowed to happen twice before correcting the trajectory on the third game, and reviewing the theoretical literature on Horcrux creation, which Hermione had tracked down through a Byzantine path of restricted section cross-references and which was deeply unpleasant reading that all three of them responded to in their characteristic ways, Hermione with focused, tightly controlled documentation, Ron with the expressions of someone watching a Quidditch disaster in slow motion, and Harry with the clean, forward-moving attention of someone turning a problem into a plan. When Bruce came back he was direct about what he'd concluded. "He's not your enemy," Bruce said, standing in the doorway of the small room McGonagall had made available for their conversation, because McGonagall's approach to the Wayne visit had been efficient and professional and entirely uncurious in the visible surface way that contained enormous depth of actual observation. "He's not an ally in the full sense either. He's a man who's been right about a lot of things for a very long time and has let being right become its own kind of certainty." He sat down. "He genuinely cares about you. That's real. It coexists with the plan he has for you." "Both things," Harry said. "Both things. What did you say to him?" Bruce looked at him. "I told him what you were when I found you and what you are now. I told him that the version of events he'd designed for you wasn't available anymore and that we would address the actual situation rather than the intended one." He paused. "I also told him that if you came to harm through negligence or through someone's strategic calculation being prioritized above your safety, I would burn the wizarding world's institutional architecture to the ground." Harry held his gaze. "You said that to Albus Dumbledore." "I said it more politely than that. The meaning was the same." "What did he say?" "He said," Bruce paused, and something moved through his expression that was quieter than usual, something that Harry recognized as the compressed version of a significant emotional response. "He said he had made mistakes in his management of your situation and that he understood my position. He said that you were," another pause. "He said that you were everything he had hoped for and considerably more than he had planned for, and that he was not yet sure whether that was a good outcome or a complicated one." "Both things," Harry said again. "Both things," Bruce agreed. They were quiet for a moment. The fire in the small room crackled. Outside, the Scottish Highlands were doing what they did in December, which was largely committed to the elimination of comfort through wind and darkness. "The Horcruxes," Harry said. "Yes. He has a plan for them. A sequential, careful, extended plan. I'm going to need to move faster than his timeline." "Why?" "Because his timeline accounts for me being a student first and a threat to Voldemort second. I don't have the same constraints." He looked at Bruce. "He's also planning for me to die at the end. His plan requires it. So any timeline he sets will have my death as a scheduled feature rather than a variable." Bruce's jaw tightened. The controlled compression. "I'm going to find another way," Harry said. "I think there is one. I think the mechanism of what my mother did, the love magic, the protection, I think it operates in the direction of both the mark it left on me and the mark it should have left on Voldemort. Something went wrong that night that made his killing curse rebound. Something of him broke. What broke, and whether that's reversible without my death," he paused. "I need more information." "Where do you get it?" "Tom Riddle's history," Harry said. "His full history. The psychology of someone who decided to split their own soul and what that does to the parts you can't put in a vessel. There's something in the mechanism of Horcrux creation that creates a vulnerability. Dumbledore sees the vulnerability as me. I think the vulnerability is in the Horcruxes themselves." He picked up his pen. "I need time and I need access to what Dumbledore knows about Riddle's history. He'll give it. He'll negotiate on it. But yes, eventually." Harry looked at the fire. "He wants the same outcome I want. We just disagree on whether I have to die to achieve it. That's actually a better basis for working together than most disagreements." Bruce looked at him for a long, level moment. The look was doing the thing again, the inventory check, the all clear, but layered now, deeper than physical, the check that had been developing over 7 years of the morning kitchen table and the cave and the chess and the training and the glass on the pavement night in a Gotham alley. "You're 11 years old," Bruce said. "I know. You're having a strategic argument with Albus Dumbledore about the terms of your own potential death." "Yes. And you're going to win it." "I intend to," Harry said. "Though I'll need your help." Bruce said, "You have it." He said it with the completeness and the lack of qualification of a person for whom the sentence was not a decision but a fact. "Whatever you need." Harry nodded. He picked up his pen. He looked at the notes spread across the table, the Horcrux theory, the prophecy analysis, the riddle profile, the energy data from the stone, all of it building towards something he couldn't see the full shape of yet but was beginning to feel the edges of. "There's something Voldemort said," Harry said. Bruce waited. "He said he'd never met anyone like me. He said he wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating me again." Harry turned the pen. "But that's not quite what he said. He said he wouldn't make that mistake again." "Specific." "Which means he identified a specific mistake he made in that encounter." "What mistake?" "He talked to me." Harry looked at the fire. "He explained himself. He gave me information about his motivations, his thinking, his emotional investment in survival. He gave me the shape of his psychology." Harry paused. "I think he did it because he genuinely wanted me to understand him. And he doesn't do that with people he's sure of. He only does it with people whose reaction he's not certain of." His voice was steady, analytical, but underneath it was something that wasn't entirely analytical. "He's interested in me. Not the boy who lived, me, specifically. What I am." Bruce sat with this. "Is that dangerous?" "Yes. It's also the most useful piece of information I have about him." Harry looked at his hands. "He's been alone for a very long time. Not practically alone, he has followers, he has plans, he has a whole apparatus. But alone in the sense of, there's no one in his world who operates at his level. No one he has to genuinely account for." He paused. "Until now." The fire crackled. "I'm not going to feel sorry for him," Harry said clearly. "He's killed hundreds of people and intends to kill more. His loneliness is not a mitigation." He paused. "But it's a variable. And variables are useful." Bruce looked at him. "When did you get this old?" He said, and it came out different from how he'd clearly intended it, quieter, heavier, the question landing in the room as something more like an acknowledgement than a complaint. Harry looked up. He looked at Bruce, at the dark jacket and the civilian face and the quality that didn't fully disappear even out of the suit, the quality of someone who had organized himself entirely around vigilance and found it a reasonable trade. He looked at the person who had picked him up from a Gotham alley and sat across from him on the wet ground and taken his cowl off and held his hand on the walk back to the car. "I don't know," Harry said honestly. "Somewhere in the middle of everything." Bruce looked at him for a moment. He said, "You're doing well." He said it in the manner of someone reporting an assessment rather than offering a compliment, which was the version Harry could hear clearly. "You should know that." Harry held the look. He felt the weight of it land, not in the eager way of a child needing approval, but in the quieter, more solid way of a person receiving information that confirmed something they'd been working toward. Recognition rather than reassurance. "I know," Harry said. "We're doing well." A pause. Bruce's expression did something small and private. He looked at the table. "Work to do," he said. "Yes," Harry said. He pulled his notes toward him and they worked through the evening in the way they always had, Bruce at the secondary position and Harry at the primary, the fire going down and the Highland dark pressing against the windows and the enormous problem of Tom Riddle spread across the table between them, and it was the most at home Harry had felt since September 1st. Outside, somewhere in the dark, Voldemort was planning his return with the new information that Harry Potter was not the instrument Dumbledore had designed. He was something else entirely. And he was not alone. Somewhere in the castle's depths, the chess set in the third-floor chamber was resetting itself for whatever came next. Dumbledore sat in his office and looked at Fawkes and thought about Muggle detectives and 11-year-olds who used their own lives as negotiating chips and the specific terrible hope of someone whose plan had failed and who was beginning to wonder if the alternative was better. And in the small fire-lit room off the Gryffindor wing, Harry Potter and Bruce Wayne worked the problem, and the problem was difficult and the stakes were enormous and neither of them was particularly worried. They'd worked with worse.